traveling at 150 miles per hour. U.S. Air Flight 1493 descends toward runway 24 left.
What the hell?
The aircraft was fully engulfed in flames.
At one of the busiest airports in the world, a Boeing 737 has just exploded into flames upon landing. But the full scope of this tragedy is far bigger than anyone can imagine. The Port of Miami, December 19, 2005. Trucks Ocean Airways flies seaplanes in and out of this busy waterway. Today, Flight 101 from Fort Lauderdale is making a brief stopover here on its way to the Bahamas. Michelle Marks is in command of today's flight. She was promoted to captain earlier this year. First Officer Paul DeSanctis joined the airline 8 months ago. The Miami seaplane base has no control tower. The crew has to keep a lookout for boat traffic as they taxi through one of the busiest ports in the world. Flight 101 will take off from X-44, a seaplane base near a channel known as Government Cut.
Prepare for takeoff.
Roger. Ready to take off.
Both pilots have their hand on the throttles. It's to prevent the captain from inadvertently pulling back if the plane hits a wave.
45 knots. 50 knots.
This is the moment most passengers are paying for, the takeoff. Half speedboat, half plane. It's a unique thrill.
75 knots. 80 knots.
For the pilots, accelerating through the waves is often the most difficult part of the flight. But this takeoff goes smoothly. Flight 101 is no longer a boat. It's now a plane en route to Bimini. It's 2:38 in the afternoon. The plane's flight path takes it past South Beach, where sunbathers and surfers are out in force. Just less than a minute into the flight, the Grumman Mallard is climbing through 500 feet, well below the clouds. Then, the plane rolls violently and dives. The pilots barely have time to register what's happening. Their struggles are in vain. By chance, a tourist from New York catches Flight 101's final moments on his camera. 60 seconds after takeoff, the plane slams into the ocean. Two lifeguards are the first rescuers to go looking for the plane. But the effort is futile. All 20 people on board are dead, including pilots Paul DeSanctis and Michelle Marks. Media coverage of the crash gives investigators a very rare piece of evidence. The video only captured the final seconds of the plane crash, but it confirms eyewitness reports that a wing ripped off in midair. As with most aircraft, the Mallard's wings are built from aluminum alloy. The spars run the length of each wing. In between the spars are stringers that give added support. Together, these parts make up the wing box, which also doubles as a fuel tank. Over the years, the wing box had been repaired many times. Truck's mechanics had patched up areas damaged by corrosion, which is not unusual for an aging aircraft, especially a seaplane. But when investigators examine the rest of the Chalk's fleet, they find that the Mallards are in far worse shape than they imagined. Years earlier, A mechanic had spotted the crack on the lower surface of the wing. He repaired it by drilling a hole in the path of the crack. It's called a stop drill hole. But the stop drill holes didn't work. Even as mechanics put in more holes, the crack kept growing. Investigators now know the right wing was damaged long before the day of the accident. What they don't understand is why the crack could not be stopped.
Approved.
But a glimmer of an answer comes when they learn the plane was sending out warning signs of a deeper, more serious problem. According to the log, fuel leaks from the right wing were repaired again and again, but they kept happening. Just 2 days before the crash, it happened again. While doing routine maintenance on the Mallard, a mechanic came across fuel dripping from the right wing. The procedure for plugging a leak was to apply a chemical sealant to the inside of the empty fuel tank. The sealant would take a day to dry. Then the plane could be refueled and returned to service. The leak should have been a clue that the crack in the wing skin was just the tip of the iceberg, that there was a much more dangerous problem with the wing's interior structure. Clint Cruikshanks examines the pieces that make up the right fuel tank.
Some kind of sealant.
He wonders why the fuel leaks persisted in spite of the constant efforts to repair them.
Okay. Hand me that scraper, please. Thank you.
Beneath the layers of sealant, he finds the answer.
Bingo.
Cracks in a critical support beam called a Z-stringer. It's the piece that the plane's skin was directly attached to.
All right, will you finish cleaning this off and then get some pictures, okay? Thank you.
Cruikshanks finds evidence that Chalk's mechanics had tried to repair the stringer. The broken Z-stringer weakened the entire wing. Now, with every takeoff and landing, the plane's skin was absorbing the forces. Over time, the skin began to crack as well. The final outcome was inevitable. Korean Airlines Flight 007 and all 269 people on board have vanished. All efforts to contact the flight have failed.
There was concern that it had been either forced to land or crashed, or within hours, the story began circulating in Washington that the Soviets had been involved.
As the world waits for news about the incident, U.S. military officials make a horrible discovery. At the time of the flight's disappearance, U.S. soldiers heard what they thought was a routine Soviet training mission.
При нарушении государственной границы приблизиться к цели и уничтожить.
It doesn't seem possible that the Soviets would actually shoot down a passenger plane. But American officials have little doubt. The next morning, U.S. Secretary of State George Shultz delivers an unusually blunt statement.
The United States reacts with revulsion to this attack. Loss of life appears to be heavy. We can see no excuse whatsoever for this appalling act.
1983 is the height of the Cold War. Russia and much of Eastern Europe are united by communist ideology. Ruled with an iron fist, the Soviet Union is locked in a bitter political struggle with the West.
Relations were bad, but no one really knew how bad, how dangerously bad they were.
Initially, Soviet officials deny responsibility for the KAL disaster.
The story came out of Moscow was that the plane appeared, we intercepted it, tried to make it stop, it didn't, it flew away. That was the first story.
But soon they reverse course and come clean. A Soviet fighter jet did, in fact, shoot the plane down. But they insist the attack was justified.
The Soviet view was that it was on a spy mission, perhaps carrying instruments, cameras, recorders, and so forth.
The Soviet Union claims Flight 007 entered highly restricted airspace under orders from the U.S. government. But the U.S. insists KAL-007 was a routine passenger flight. The dispute only heightens political tensions. In a rare move, U.S. officials share highly classified surveillance data from the night of the shootdown. A top-secret technology called passive radar can track the movements of every military and civilian plane around the globe. What it reveals about KAL-007 is stunning. The plane was way off course. For almost its entire journey across the Pacific, the flight had been drifting north. By the time it was shot down, Flight 007 was 350 miles north of where it should have been, and had already flown in and out of Soviet territory. The Soviets were telling the truth.
And then it becomes a question of determining why was it off course that much.
In the months following the KAL disaster, unidentifiable human remains wash ashore in northern Japan. Small pieces of wreckage are also found. Investigators have no doubt that the plane was completely destroyed. Investigators have no clear idea where Flight 007 went down. But there are some people who do. Top Soviet officials are hiding the fact that 1 month after the incident, not only did they find the wreckage, they also found the all-important black boxes.
It was a big pile of debris. They took down this pile with their bare hands until they found the black boxes. There were 2 of them.
But the Soviets keep the boxes to themselves. The information is locked away. Until nearly 10 years later. After the turn of the decade brings a jubilant end to the Cold War. Glasnost ushers in a new spirit of openness in Russia. Eager to break with the past, the new administration in Moscow decides to go public.
The actual unveiling of the data recorders and black boxes was a total surprise. And suddenly this new material promised some real answers.
So I knew they're gonna tell me something. I wanted to have the facts from the tapes and then see how does those facts compare to what we wrote in 1983.
In 1992, during official ceremonies in Seoul, Russian leader Boris Yeltsin hands over the long-awaited flight recorders.
I was approached by KGB general, and he told me that you probably don't know me, but I have had the recorders for 10 years. I had them in the safe in my office. I knew it was a big international secret. It bothered me tremendously. Every day when I came to the office and I looked at my safe, and I knew the recorders were there. He told me, you may not understand that this is the happiest day in my life.
Investigators have long suspected that the crew either misprogrammed their navigation system or left it in the wrong mode, set on constant magnetic heading. The flight data recorder finally provides the definitive answer.
The data revealed that the aircraft was on constant magnetic heading from soon after takeoff from Anchorage to the end. There was no deviation whatsoever in the magnetic heading.
The crew of KAL-007 never activated the waypoint navigation system.
Gear up.
Landing gear up.
It seems they simply forgot a basic step in their standard flight procedure. It's early December. A massive winter storm is pounding the eastern United States.
Well, this is a pretty interesting weather pattern we have for this time of year. We're getting a mixed bag of precipitation and weather across the eastern United States.
For most people, the winter weather is no more than an inconvenience. But for those who fly, the bad weather can be deadly.
A Continental Airlines commuter plane with 48 people aboard crashed into a home in suburban Buffalo. No survivors.
People are making life and death decisions every day based on the weather. Should I go or should I not go today? And once they're up in the air, how am I going to make a decision in the next 5 minutes that's going to keep myself, my passengers, or my aircraft out of harm's way?
On this day, flights from New York to Houston have been delayed and canceled. Thousands of travelers are affected. That's largely because the people in this room have decided that it's unsafe for pilots to fly in this weather.
Our mission here is to provide safety and safe flying.
What's happening now, it's an existing condition, so.
It's like some discrete supercells in there.
This room is every pilot's first line of defense against getting caught in a storm. It's the federal government's Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City, Missouri. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the meteorologists in this room scan the skies across the United States for the weather that can bring down a plane. The storm they're tracking today is just that kind of weather.
What we're monitoring is a lot of severe weather in the Carolinas and continuing to get severe thunderstorm warnings and tornado warnings there.
The meteorologists have detected thunderstorms moving towards Atlanta, Georgia. They've warned pilots and air traffic controllers of the looming danger. The result is immediate.
So you had planes that were on the ground that could not take off. Then you had planes that were arriving that were unable to land. And then you have to factor in that they were going several hundred miles around this line of thunderstorms.
Today, the people who work here have to find a way to keep planes out of the storms that are rolling through the south.
As traffic managers, we need to work with the FAA in routing safe routes for aircraft to go around those thunderstorms because they just can't go through them or over them. So using these two images together, we can get a good three-dimensional or even four-dimensional picture of the atmosphere and how moisture is moving around in there.
Thunderstorms are a lethal threat to pilots. The clouds that contain them are massive. They're usually much too tall to fly over, and the weather inside them can be treacherous.
In no instance does any aircraft want to go into a thunderstorm. Lightning strikes, hail can certainly damage the airframe, and in the extreme cases, there can be so much liquid precipitation in that thunderstorm that it'll cause a jet engine to flame out.
The meteorologists here understand the danger of thunderstorms.
Tower, Delta 191 Heavy, out here in the rain. Feels good.
191 Heavy?
We're not getting any bad warnings from the weather or from other pilots, which we rely on as they come through it.
As the pilots of Delta 191 prepare for landing, the rain begins to fall harder. At the foot of the runway, one of the most ferocious types of storm cloud stands in their way.
Before landing check.
Landing gear.
Down, 3 green.
At the time, the type of storm the Delta crew is approaching barely has a name. John McCarthy is one of the world's leading experts on these storms.
It is a tiny thing, meteorologically speaking, compared to a big storm or a snowstorm or a hurricane. It's just like a needle in a haystack.
The needle is a microburst, one of the deadliest and at the time most poorly understood weather phenomena. They've taken down airliners before, but as Delta 191 makes its approach, there are no warning systems that can effectively alert the pilots of the danger they're in.
Prior to 1985, the radars on board the aircraft
were built to detect thunderstorms, essentially heavy areas of precipitation. They were not effective. They were not even designed to detect the microburst.
If you're at the kitchen sink and you turn on the water and it goes straight down and it splashes out in all directions. And that's kind of what a microburst is, except that it is extremely bad news if you're an airplane flying through it.
When a plane hits a microburst, it encounters a complex and powerful set of conditions. Downdrafts and tailwinds batter a plane. It's a deadly combination. Just short of the runway, Delta 191 flies into the microburst.
You're gonna lose it all of a sudden. There it is. Push it up. Push it way up. Way up. Way up. Way up. Hang on to the son of... He's gonna crash.
The pilots of Delta Flight 191 did their very best to recover from this situation, and it didn't work out.
I must have caught sight of him just at the last millisecond, and he cartwheeled into the tank in just an instant, and then of course there was fire, not a ball of fire, but a wall of fire.
Just 27 people survived the crash of Delta 191. 137 people are killed. After the crash of Delta 191, the Federal Aviation Administration races to develop technology that can prevent microbursts from killing again.
If there is one crash that we can look back on now and say, this made things safer because we learned from it, it was Delta 191.
By law, airplane manufacturers must prove their planes can be evacuated quickly and safely. When the 737 was introduced in the UK, Boeing demonstrated that 130 people could get off the plane in just 75 seconds.
All public transport aircraft are certificated to the same criteria, and that is that the total complement of passengers must be capable of evacuating from the aircraft using half the exits in the aircraft, it's generally one side or the other, within a maximum of 90 seconds.
A full Boeing 737 is designed to be evacuated in less than 2 minutes. More of the passengers on Flight 28 should have been able to get off. But 90 seconds after Flight 28 came to a stop, most of the passengers were still on board.
It just seemed to go on forever before they started evacuating. And that's when I thought, I'm not going to get off, it's going to blow up with all of us on it.
The most important lesson of British Air Tours Flight 28 is that seconds matter.
The reason why the evacuation in Manchester wasn't achieved in 90 seconds is because the conditions in a real fire evacuation are completely different from the certification conditions.
The evacuation of Flight 28 was slowed by the fact that passengers became jammed in the bulkhead opening, separating the main cabin from the galley.
We wanted to start to evacuate the passengers, but there's a bit of a bottleneck and nobody was coming forward.
But with every second, their odds of surviving are decreasing. Flight 28 is becoming a death trap.
28, you are clear for takeoff.
Stop.
137 people are on board this British Air Tours flight.
I could see orange flames inside the back of the engine.
Within minutes, nearly half of them will be dead. The fire in the cabin had been severe, but should not have been catastrophic. This leaves investigators with two questions. Why did so many people die? And what caused the fire? During a routine inspection a year and a half earlier, mechanics had found small cracks in some of the combustor cans. Since the repair, there were 11 reports of slow acceleration from the engine that exploded in Manchester. A damaged combustor can could have been a reason for the problem, but the log entry led Captain Terrington to believe that the problem had been fixed. Investigators still don't understand how a fire outside the plane spread into the cabin as quickly as it did. Believing he had a blown tire, Captain Terrington made a fateful decision.
Stop it. 28 Mike, we are abandoning takeoff.
Captain Terrington turned his plane to the right and brought it to a stop. He couldn't have realized that doing so would make the problem far worse.
There was a crosswind, a slight crosswind, from the left side of the aircraft that was carrying the fire that was burning from the fuel that was pulled underneath the left wing. It carried that fire aft, rearwards, and to over and under the rear fuselage, in between the wing and the tailplane.
The wind wrapped the fire around the back of the plane and into the cabin. Investigators have discovered how the fire started and the conditions that caused it to penetrate the cabin. Now, investigator Ed Trimble must solve the biggest mystery surrounding the Manchester accident to figure out why so many died. Investigators learn that most of the dead were not found in the worst burned parts of the plane. Autopsies will point to the real killer on Flight 28. For investigators trying to solve a plane crash, the most important tool can be the black box. It records every detail in the cockpit and tells investigators about vital conversations. But in the crash of Northwest Airlines Flight 255, it wasn't what investigators heard on the tape, it was what they didn't hear that would lead to an astonishing conclusion. An alarm should have sounded when the pilots tried to take off with their flaps retracted. But for some reason, investigators can't hear it on the cockpit voice recorder.
When it activates, it alerts the crew that the aircraft is not in a configuration that's safe for takeoff.
Technicians analyze the cockpit voice recorder for more clues, and they find something unusual. The takeoff configuration warning is what would have alerted them about the flaps and slats.
Flaps, slats, flaps.
It's a warning. It's meant to alert you, and if it's going off routinely all the time, it gets on their nerves, and so apparently pilots were routinely silencing those takeoff warnings.
There's a line here.
For the crew, it's been a long day.
Another one here about 25 miles wide.
Well, if we get out of here pretty quick, we won't have a delay.
They've already flown from Minneapolis, Minnesota to Saginaw, Michigan, and then Detroit. Phoenix is their next stop on the way to Santa Ana, California. The plane's 149 passengers are also eager to leave. Paula Sheehan and her family have been visiting relatives. They're heading home to Arizona. Her daughter Cecilia is only 4 years old. Flight 255 begins moving from the gate to the runway.
Northwest 255.
But because of the weather,
Northwest 255, now exit at Charlie runway 3 center.
the ground controller gives them a last-minute runway change with disastrous results.
I prayed that everybody made it, but I thought it was just a small plane because it happened so quickly. I didn't know it was a bigger plane, and it was just awful.
Just minutes after impact, paramedic Tim Schroeder is on the scene looking for survivors.
I have never been to an accident of that scale. We were struck by the magnitude of what we were seeing, the large scale of it. It was almost overwhelming.
From the little that's left of Flight 255, it is unlikely they'll find anyone alive.
It was probably a minute went by and Dan actually heard a noise. He asked me a couple times, do I hear anything? And I said no. And then finally I heard it. And it was more like a faint cry. When I turned my head to the right, I saw an arm underneath the seat.
1, 2, 3, lift!
She was covered in some blood and some soot.
Somehow, 4-year-old Cecilia Sheehan has survived the crash. But she's badly injured. Tim Schroeder races her to the hospital.
We have a 4-year-old girl found alive in the wreckage. She has a very weak pulse.
If Cecilia survived, perhaps others have as well.
We can't be sure why the little girl survived.
Investigator Jack Drake needs to know what contributed to the death of her family and all the other victims.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're currently #1 for departure. We should be rolling in a couple minutes.
Let's do the checklist.
Brakes.
Set.
Windshield heat. It's on.
There are hundreds of small steps for a crew to take to get a passenger jet off the ground. Most of them are covered by checklists.
The checklist is a means by which you ensure that important items are positioned or done properly.
Looks like bags are all in.
Why don't you tell them we're ready to go?
144,000 pounds of passengers and aircraft hurtles down runway 3C. Within 17 seconds, just under 50 feet from the ground, the aircraft begins rolling from side to side. It seems the crew overlooked a very important step. If the crew tried to take off with the flaps retracted, it would be an astonishing blunder. To get the plane off the ground, the flaps on the wings should have been extended to the 11-degree position. But the way the flap handle is damaged suggests the plane's flaps were retracted when it crashed.
If the slats are retracted, and for the most part, with today's modern jets, the airplane is not capable of flight.
It appears the downing of Flight 255 was caused by pilot error. For some reason, a seasoned crew forgot one of the most basic steps involved in getting an airplane off the ground. The cause of the crash remains a mystery. 18 days into the investigation, the Canadian government appoints Justice Virgil Moshansky to lead a more wide-ranging inquiry into all aspects of the aviation system that might have contributed to the Air Ontario tragedy.
The government was looking for an experienced trial judge, and preferably one with an aviation background.
Moshansky is an experienced pilot with 13 years on the bench. He will work closely with crash investigator David Rohrer and aviation consultant Frank Black. The new team's first step, assessing the plane's technical systems.
The electrical system, the hydraulic system, the fuel system, all of these systems are looked at both in terms of what is their history leading up to the accident and what remnants are remaining at the crash site that can be examined.
Clues to a possible system failure arise when Sonia Hartwick recalls a troubling event.
As we took off, I noticed that the wings just became a solid sheen of gray, shiny ice.
Investigators consult the F-28's manuals to study its de-icing systems. They find that only the wing's leading edges are protected.
The aircraft had heated leading edges on the wings.
I wonder if the anti-icing system was working.
And the heat was provided by bleed air from the compressors on the engine. They found the valves that allow the compressed air access to the leading edges. And they tested the valve to see if it functioned, and it did.
The anti-icing system was working. But since it only heats the leading edge, it likely didn't clear ice that formed on the surface of Flight 1363's wings. Investigators suspect that snow and ice buildup, what experts call wing contamination, may have played a major role in the crash. To verify that suspicion, Rohrer and his team meet with engineers from Fokker.
Thanks for coming. Curious to see what you have.
Jack Van Hengst, who was the chief engineer, had extensive aerodynamic studies and data on the effects of contamination on an F-28 airplane.
Fokker engineers have run simulations of the crash.
They were able to get some very good data in terms of the performance of the airplane, simulating the type of loads, temperatures, etc., that the Dryden aircraft would have been exposed to.
Investigators make a crucial discovery about the design of the F-28. Because of the angle of the wings, a very small amount of ice makes the plane susceptible to stalling.
They concluded that even the most minute bit of contamination on the wing would disrupt the airflow and cause a loss of lift.
Well, that answers a lot of questions.
The simulations support what witnesses saw.
It just barely got airborne, dropping wings, losing lift, and then hitting trees, decelerating to the point where it broke up.
Investigators are now certain that contaminated wings caused the crash. But what's still unclear is why the plane was not de-iced before takeoff. March 10th, 1989. It's 11:39 a.m. at Dryden, Ontario's airport. Light snow falls as Air Ontario Flight 1363 stops in the remote northern community on its way from Thunder Bay to Winnipeg. As First Officer Keith Mills checks on weather conditions, Captain George Morwood returns from making a phone call inside the airport.
It's getting worse. What's the latest?
And it won't clear till late afternoon.
Check that. Quite heavy snow. Looks like it's going to be a bad one. It's still within our takeoff limits.
Well, that's good. We got a lot of people who want to make their connectors. Let's hope it holds.
Temperatures hover around freezing. Captain Morwood uses the power of engine number 2 already running to fire engine number 1. Morwood and Mills are both highly experienced pilots. However, they've each flown fewer than 100 hours in the Fokker F-28. The multi-million-dollar aircraft is the first Air Ontario jet to serve the remote northern Ontario region. 24 minutes after landing in Dryden, Flight 1363 is ready to leave. Finally, an hour behind schedule, the plane taxis to runway 29. Captain Morwood performs a brief engine run-up, heating the engines to rid them of any accumulated snow and ice. Then he begins his roll down the runway.
B1.
The F-28 reaches its takeoff speed.
Rotate.
80 knots. Clearly, there's something wrong. The F-28 struggles to get airborne. The pilots are helpless. 49 seconds after lifting off, Air Ontario Flight 1363 crash lands in the brush, west of runway 29. "45 people survive the accident, but 24 people do not, including Captain Morwood and First Officer Mills. Investigators are certain that the crew of Flight 296 mishandled a risky maneuver. Bechet has more questions for the captain.
What did you do when you saw the trees?
I did what any pilot would do. I tried to climb over them.
Investigators learn that in the final moments before the crash,
Take off, go around power.
Captain Usleen applied full throttle.
When I was waiting for the engine to spool up, then I realized in front of me there were trees, and I was waiting.
But he claims the engines did not respond. And when they finally kicked in, it was too late.
I tell you, the engines did not come on when I gave it full throttle.
He's convinced the engines didn't respond quickly enough in the final seconds of the flight, and makes his mission to prove it. He uncovers an Airbus document warning of a defect in the A320, which states that the plane's engine speed could stagnate at low altitude, a condition caused by poor airflow. When this occurs, the engine cannot accelerate. But investigators can find no evidence of such a failure in any of the data from the plane. In the 5 seconds after Captain Asselin applied full power on the thrust levers, the A320 twin engines had begun to spool up, reaching 84% thrust, close to full power, just before the plane hit the trees.
When you put from idle to full power, you have the impression that nothing happens for a few seconds, and then the power comes. But that was normal, exactly as predicted by the certification. We were able to compare the RPM of the engines from the flight data recorder. There was nothing wrong with the engines, any of the 2 engines.
Chief Investigator Claude Bechet has a new headache. Captain Asselin is convinced there is a conspiracy against him. He cuts off all cooperation with the investigation.
Investigation committee had tried to cooperate with them, but they began to be suspicious. And the press, each week, the aircraft is good, the aircraft has nothing, pilot error, pilot error, pilot error. All that was a big, big, big cover-up, my opinion.
Captain Asselin begins a campaign to challenge the French investigation. He appears on British television to make a dramatic assertion.
When I pull the stick to up position, the flight controls, the elevator control go to down position. So on any aircraft, if you ask up, following the order of the pilots, the elevator control goes to up. And not that on that one, it went to down. Why? That would be the good question.
His accusations go to the heart of doubts about the aircraft. That Airbus's fly-by-wire system had given the A320's computers too much control. Asselin's claim that the plane didn't follow his instructions is supported by data from the plane's flight recorder. The black box recorded every movement of the pilot's side stick controller. It does show that seconds before the crash, Captain Asselin pulled it back to get the plane's nose up. Investigators compare it with what the plane did in response. They make a perplexing discovery.
He's telling the truth. The elevator moved down.
Captain Michel Asselin is one of Air France's most distinguished pilots. He's the head of pilot training for the company's newest plane, the Airbus A320.
I was in charge of the launching of the 320 in Air France. The company used me to promote the aircraft. Speeches to make, I was constantly on the television, on newspaper.
The aircraft is booked to perform a low-altitude flyover at a local air show. It's only a 5-minute flight to Absheim Airfield, where the air show is being held. For this sleepy Alsatian town, the air show is the highlight of the summer.
The air show drew more than 5,000 people. There was significant interest from the public.
Many passengers have friends and family watching from the ground.
Air Charter 296, good afternoon.
Absheim, hello. We are coming into view of the airfield for the flyover.
Yes, I can see you. You're cleared. The sky's clear.
Gear down.
Flight 296 makes a gentle turn to line up with the runway. The pilots must now lose more altitude and speed to get into position for the flyover.
200. 200. Mesdames et messieurs, votre attention s'il vous plaît. L'Airbus A320 arrive.
For Asselin, this will be the most delicate part of the maneuver. He must keep the plane in a stable position, with the nose up, but not too high.
I looked at the ground and said, look, he's not high enough, because you could see the grass right out your window.
Okay, I'm okay there. Disconnect auto throttle.
He disables one of the plane's safety features so that the computer won't speed up the slow-moving plane. Only now, Captain Asselin sees something that makes his blood run cold. there's a forest in the path of Captain Usleen's plane.
30. Take off, go around power.
He selects the highest thrust setting and pulls back on the controls, expecting the aircraft to pull up. But the plane keeps dropping.
Can't be.
J'ai commencé à voir par le hublot des branches d'arbres.
I started to see through the window tree branches. I was astonished. You can imagine being on a trail in a large vehicle, a bumpy trail, driving at 80 or 100 kilometers an hour, and you're shaking from all sides. It was like that. I was saying to myself, the plane has to stay in one piece, because if the plane stays whole, we'll be okay. If it breaks up, we're done for.
S'il casse, c'est fichu.
Still full of fuel, the right wing of the jet is sheared off. The fuel ignites immediately on impact.
And we stopped very quickly. And on the ground, I broke my seat, just because I was holding very firmly. I broke my seat, and I could see a lot of flames all over.
The first officer is badly injured.
And he has a lot of blood. And even with the full harness, he hit something in front of him.
What the hell have you done?
I don't know. I don't understand.
June 30th, 1956. Los Angeles International Airport. TWA Flight 2 takes off eastbound for Kansas City. The TWA flight is a Lockheed Super Constellation, one of the most advanced commercial airliners of its time. Just minutes behind TWA Flight 2, United Airlines Flight 718 takes off from the same airport on its way to Chicago. The system to track both of the planes is far from high-tech.
The Air Traffic Control Center consisted of a room with a map spread out on a table, and the air traffic controllers were moving markers on that map to indicate where each airplane was in its last known position.
The pilots radio their position to company dispatchers. Controllers use this information to get a rough idea of their flight plans.
They were on radar for a while in Los Angeles, but once they got outside that area, there was no radar.
They were flying under visual flight rules. The rule is called see and be seen. So I see you, you see me, we stay apart, and we're responsible for our own separation.
As the two planes get closer to the Grand Canyon, the distance between them disappears.
Both captains were used to showing the canyon off on a clear day. They could move the airplane to the left, move it to the right a little bit, point out the canyon to people and get them to ooh and ah.
The United flight closes in on the TWA plane from the right, unaware their paths are about to cross. People make mistakes. It's a lesson the airline industry has learned the hard way. A lesson that fundamentally shaped how planes travel across the skies today. Mistakes can be made for a number of reasons. The tools controllers use to track them are inadequate.
Controllers have been complaining about the radars for a long time.
The failing system is putting passengers at risk. Labor Day weekend, 1986. Approach controller Walter White guides Aeromexico Flight 498 in for a landing at Los Angeles International Airport. The airspace around LAX is very tightly controlled. It's called the TCA, the Terminal Control Area. As Aeromexico Flight 498 closes in on the airport, Walter White sees a plane he does not expect on his radar.
Okay, you are right in the middle of the TCA, sir.
Grumman 66 Romeo, I suggest in future you look at your TCA chart.
Walter White hustles the small plane out of the controlled airspace, but White doesn't realize that there's another plane dangerously off course.
124.905, thank you.
Captain Christian Hequet and First Officer Joel Cherubin are experienced pilots with over 12,000 hours of flying time between them. The flight is a short hop between Lyon in central France and the city of Strasbourg in the mountainous Alsace region. The crew is flying an Airbus A320, one of the most technologically advanced commercial airplanes in the world. Cockpit of the A320 is also very different from other planes. Instead of analog gauges, the pilots look mostly at digital displays. Even before takeoff, the pilots programmed the autopilot to land on a specific runway in Strasbourg. The captain initiates the landing sequence.
Flaps towards 2.
Flaps towards 2. Flaps at 2.
Gear down.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to land in a few minutes.
Hackey notices that the plane is traveling too fast, so he extends the speed brakes. They disrupt airflow over the wing, which helps create more drag to slow the plane.
We have to watch our descent.
As it circled the mountain, the plane inexplicably entered a dangerously steep and rapid descent. But before the crew can adjust their course, the A320 has flown into the side of a mountain. The crash is catastrophic. Just minutes from Strasbourg Airport, an Airbus A320 slams into a mountaintop.
Delta Alpha, your position?
Flight 148 is no longer on radar, nor responding to radio contact. There are survivors.
And I'll panic because I'm going to burn.
With the smell of licking jet fuel in the air, the survivors move away from the burning plane. But they are still in grave danger. It's bitterly cold.
We stay together, waiting for the first aid.
But the wait will be longer than anyone might expect. And what they don't realize is that no one knows where they are.
They could be anywhere in there.
Expect this in the jungle or the rainforest, but not in a highly populated area.
Officials need to pinpoint the crash site, but it's not as easy as it might seem. The airport's radar is not recorded. There has been no signal from the plane's emergency beacon, and surprisingly, no one has reported seeing a plane go down. Landing at LAX can be a challenge for pilots. The airspace around the airport is often thick with traffic. On average, a plane arrives or departs every 50 seconds. Each of its 4 runways handles both takeoffs and landings. Taxiways intersect the runways at dozens of locations. The airport can be a maze of stops and starts for pilots following instructions issued by controllers. Local controller Robin Washer is overseeing the 2 north runways at LAX, 24 left and 24 right. The investigation into the deadly collision on runway 24 left focuses on Robin Washer's conversations with the 2 planes involved. The answer will raise alarming questions about the safety of all passengers flying to and from LAX. The air traffic control tapes reveal that Robin Washer instructed both the SkyWest Metroliner and the U.S. Air Flight to use runway 24 left at the same time. NTSB investigators now know that human error played a major role in the collision at LAX.
This situation that occurred is a situation that no controller wants to go through. You train your whole career for this not to happen, and when it does happen, it's you can't even describe the feelings that you go through. A situation like this could potentially happen to anybody. We are all human.
After the accident, Washer left her job at LAX and never worked as an air traffic controller again.
4875, good night now.
518, taxi across runway 24 left. Contact ground point.
February the 1st, 1991. Los Angeles International Airport, LAX.
246 heading 270, contact Los Angeles departure. Thank you, US Air 1493. You're cleared to land 24 left.
Cleared to land 24 left, 1493.
Traveling at 150 miles per hour. US Air Flight 1493 descends toward runway 24 left.
What the hell?
I pointed to the aircraft and yelled, US Air is crashing. The aircraft was fully engulfed in flames.
At one of the busiest airports in the world, a Boeing 737 has just exploded into flames upon landing. But the full scope of this tragedy is far bigger than anyone can imagine. Amid the wreckage, they have made an alarming discovery.
This is Rescue 1. We've got a propeller down here in the wreckage.
The discovery of a propeller has horrifying implications.
There's 2 planes down here.
My first thought was, oh my God, there was someone else under there, and we didn't even realize it.
Emergency personnel find parts of the smaller plane strewn across runway 24 left. There were 12 people on board the flight. None have survived. What's left of their plane is crushed between US Air 1493 and an abandoned building near the runway. With the plane now less than 5 miles from the runway, a controller in the airport's tower takes over to guide the flight in for landing.
Lindbergh, PSA
182, downwind.
182, roger.
Within the airport traffic area, which is that 5-mile radius, the airplanes coming into the airport to land and take off are controlled by that controller.
The tower controller is juggling several planes in addition to the PSA 727.
PSA 182, traffic 12 o'clock, 1 mile, a Cessna.
Because there's only one runway at Lindbergh, it requires some air traffic control spacing because of the difference in the speeds of the aircraft.
PSA 182, cleared to land.
182 is cleared to land.
The jets have quite a significantly faster approach speed than the Cessna, so you have to give them more spacing.
It's now 9 a.m. Many passengers on Flight 182 are planning to put in a full day's work in San Diego.
Gear down.
Minutes from landing, pilot Bob Fox spots a distant plane.
There's one underneath. I was looking at that inbound over there. Easy, baby, easy, baby.
A professional photographer happens to spot Flight 182 in flames.
Hey, what do we got here? It's bad. Huh? We're hit, man. We're hit. Talk.
We're going down. This is PSA.
Okay, we'll call the equipment for you.
The approach controller's radar reveals that the 727 has collided with the Cessna.
Jesus Christ. It's an aluminum shower.
To have 2 aircraft under your control collide is the worst nightmare, I think, for any controller. I don't think anything else could be that bad.
This is it, baby.
Brace yourself.
Ma, I love you.
And all of a sudden, just went right in, just a burst of flames. It was just incredible. Can't do anything about it. Come on.
And my hair stood up on the back of my head when I learned that this crash had occurred. This huge mushroom cloud of smoke and fire was seen by thousands of people.
Two planes have collided and fallen from the sky over San Diego. The city is in shock. But the full scope of the tragedy is only beginning to emerge. Investigators now realize that they may never find out why the pilot of a Cessna changed its heading, putting it on the same flight path as a 727. What's not in question is that it was the responsibility of the 727's crew to avoid the Cessna. In Washington, investigators review the PSA crew's last moments on the recovered cockpit voice recording.
All right, hit it.
Are we clear of that Cessna?
Supposed to be.
I guess. I hope. Oh, yeah.
Hold on. Go back.
Philip Hoag focuses in on the conversation recorded 35 seconds before the collision.
Are we clear of that Cessna?
Supposed to be.
I guess. I hope. Oh, yeah. Before we turned downwind, I saw him about 1 o'clock. Probably behind us now.
Stop it.
The PSA crew not only doesn't see the Cessna, they assume they have already passed it.
It was right in front of them the whole time.
The NTSB conducts a study to determine how long the PSA crew could see the Cessna through their windscreen.
Well, welcome aboard. Now, use the reference points to adjust your seat.
They start by adjusting the pilot's seats for optimal viewing, using a device called the Design Eye Reference Point.
Now, if you would, please take a measurement from my eye line to the white ball in the middle. Okay, now from the eyeball to the floor, please.
Once the pilot's viewing positions have been determined, the photographer uses a special camera to take panoramic images of each pilot's view.
Okay, let's have a look at what the pilots can see. Would you put up the view?
He starts with the captain's view.
Please.
Radar tracks provide the Cessna's heading, pitch, and bank angle. They plot this data on top of the photographs in 10-second intervals.
All right. Let's see what the co-pilot can see, please.
What they find is surprising. A longer than expected time period in which the PSA crew could see the Cessna.
How can you miss a plane that is staring you in the face? Okay. Can you show me how you normally adjust your seat, please?
But when investigators learn more about how PSA pilots adjust their seats, they begin to understand how the crew may have lost sight of the Cessna.
That's it? You don't use your reference points?
Investigators discover that many pilots adjust their seats to their own personal settings. From this new seat position, the Cessna's location on the windshield is recalculated. The results show an important difference between the two seat settings. With the new setting, the crew would have had the Cessna in view for only 5 to 10 seconds, not a few minutes. BEA Flight 609 prepares for its third takeoff attempt from Munich Airport. The plane, carrying the Manchester United Football Club, is drawing attention from inside the terminal.
You've got to remember these are the Busby babes. They're laughing and joking all the time, that sort of thing. But now they're quite quiet and there's a lot of tension there in the air.
Little Johnny Berry, he said, we're all going to get frickin' killed here. And Liam Whelan said, well, if it happens, I'm ready. At that point, I opened my tie.
Ignition boost switches off. Ignition boost switches off.
Wings.
Still look good? No need to de-ice.
Tower, Beeline 609 Zulu.
Uniform, I'm ready to taxi. Over.
Beeline 609, your clearance void, if not airborne, by 04, time now 02.
Roger, understand. Valid till 04.
Captain Thane has just 2 minutes before the window for takeoff closes. If this third attempt is not successful, the flight may be canceled, and his famous passengers will be grounded in Munich.
Munich 609 Zulu uniform is ready for takeoff.
Roger.
The runway is more than 2,000 yards long, even with their plan for a gradual acceleration. The Elizabethan should be able to lift off just past 1,300 yards.
So for the third time that day, they actually lined up the aircraft with the centre line, got the permission, clearance to take off, and they're away.
Full power.
Full power. Temperatures and pressures okay. Port surging slightly.
He experienced a bit of this engine surging, which he retarded the throttle slightly and then advanced it again.
Full power again.
Both engines sound an even note, and we're going down the runway now for a takeoff. Everything seems okay.
The pilots know what they're doing, boys.
I thought there's more people in this plane more frightened than what I am.
V1.
Velocity 1 is the speed at which a takeoff cannot safely be abandoned. The point of no return.
Raymond now is waiting, is anticipating now Thane to call out 119 knots, which is V2.
At 119 knots, the plane can become airborne. But something goes wrong. They suddenly lose speed.
Christ, we're not going to make it!
There was no screaming, there was no shouting, there was nothing like that at all. Darkness and daylight and sparks and thumps and smacks. And you just can't describe it.
In March 1969,
Good news.
11 years after the crash,
Finally.
the British government formally clears James Thane.
Well, of course, my family are very pleased indeed.
Well, he knew that obviously this was the right findings, and he was very pleased and happy because in this country he'd been exonerated.
But BEA does not give him his job back. Captain Thane never flies again. In Germany, Hans Reichel and the aviation authorities never exonerate him.
I think there was a huge amount of stress and strain and tension, and he died a young man. He was 54.
At Munich, there were 23 victims, and Captain Thane was the 24th.
10 years after the accident that killed 8 of its players, Manchester United becomes the first English team to win the European Cup.
At last, Matt Busby, the maestro of Manchester United, had groomed a team great enough to beat Europe's best.
A cup they might have won in 1958, if not for an aviation disaster that devastated the finest team of players Britain had ever assembled. Harry Gregg continued playing for Manchester United until 1967. Now in his 70s, he dwells only on the fond memories.
I don't think about the accident. I think about what I was part of. A team of wonderful young, spirited players, great journalists, great staff. Everything was good about it.
Captain Thane's legacy is modern aviation's improved understanding of the deadly effects of slush.
The problem is tackled now, and I would suggest it was probably a direct result of the Munich accident, airport authorities approached the problem very, very differently.
By what he did, forcing this issue, he's probably saved countless lives and prevented more than one Munich in that particular time. So in that sense, he's to be admired for what he did in those 11 years.
Mum was quoted as saying, "A man with greater integrity I will never know." But he also left an inscription for me in a book, which is the difference between the impossible and the possible is merely a measure of man's determination.
Los Angeles International Airport. At Terminal 1, a group of passengers and crew bound for San Francisco are making their way through security. A short while later, they board Pacific Southwest Airlines Flight 1771. The flight from Los Angeles to San Francisco is one of the most popular routes at Pacific Southwest, also known as PSA. Among the 38 passengers are several PSA employees, including the airline's chief pilot. Captain Greg Lindemood has been flying with PSA for 14 years. The father of 3 is also a decorated combat veteran.
Brakes. Brake set. Flaps up. Spoilers retracted.
First Officer James Nunn only joined the airline the previous spring. He's also logged thousands of hours in the cockpit.
Thrust levers.
Today, they're piloting a British-built BAE 146 commuter jet. With quiet turbofan engines, it's designed for short-haul flights over densely populated areas. The flight to San Francisco will take just over an hour.
So do you know what you're getting the boys for Christmas?
Well, it's gonna be Nintendo, and with what it costs, I think they can both share it.
Anything to drink, guys?
I'm fine, thanks.
Okay, just holler if you change your mind.
Flight 1771 is cruising at 22,000 feet above the California countryside.
Can you ask him how it's been?
Just over halfway through the flight, Captain Lindemood worries about the mild turbulence.
Center, PSA 1771. Any reports on the ride ahead? We've had a little continuous light chop.
PSA, this is Rocky Mountain Center. It's not too bad.
My God.
That was a gun.
Yeah,
The crew now has a much bigger problem on its hands.
Squawk 77, Squawk 77. We've had a gun fired on board the aircraft.
You want to go to Monterey? Could you make it, sir?
Moments later, Flight 1771 falls into a steep dive. Flight 1771 crashes into an isolated hill 170 miles northwest of Los Angeles. It doesn't take long to reach a grim conclusion. No one has survived the crash. Investigators don't know who was shot with the final bullet, just that it was fired in the cabin. It's enough for them to finally piece together a picture of the horrific final moments on board PSA 1771.
What the hell?
You can imagine what Ray Thompson must have thought as this person whom he had just terminated a few hours before walks past him in the airline, hands him this note, and then probably goes into the men's room. And he's reading this note with its ominous message.
Next, they hear the sound of the lavatory door opening.
So we're assuming that he handed Ray the note, went into the restroom where he took out the gun, came back out, we heard the door close again just before the shots.
Ray!
Ray Thompson probably has the most merciful of all the deaths on that plane.
In less than a minute, a routine flight has become a nightmare.
There's a problem, Captain. What's the problem?
He was very careful. He had done the planning thus far fairly well, and we believe he followed through with that plan.
I'm the problem.
It wouldn't take much knowledge or experience on a passenger part to know that they were in deep, deep trouble.
After shooting his former boss and 3 crew members, David Burke pushed Flight 1771 into a dive and left the cockpit. The airline's chief pilot was now the only person on board who could pull the plane out of the dive.
An off-duty pilot may have been moving himself forward to try to render whatever assistance he could once he realized something drastic was happening.
What the hell are you doing? You gotta let me in there. Don't do this. Come on.
But Burke had 1 bullet
What
left.
the hell are you doing?
That may have accounted for the 6th shot. There are some who speculate that David Burke was taking his own life. The evidence suggests otherwise. Had David Burke been taking his own life, the gun would have fallen from his hand after he had shot himself.
But since a fragment of Burke's fingertip was recovered from the trigger guard, Bretzing reasons that the killer was alive, holding onto the gun until the very moment of impact.
Alarms were sounding in the cockpit. There was increased noise of the plane plummeting. Then just before impact, it became silent. They tell us that it actually broke the sound barrier. Of course, it would have been a horrifying experience, the final few seconds of their lives.
One man's rage meant 2 minutes of pure terror for 42 people. The plane is descending to the runway at 1,600 feet per minute, faster than the space shuttle comes in to land.
That's fine. I got the runway. It's off to the right, over there. Over there.
But the pilots can't slow their plane. In fact, Fitch must increase engine speed to keep the nose up.
Bring it on down.
Oh, baby. Ease her on down.
Tell them we're 2 minutes away from landing.
2 minutes away from landing, 2 minutes.
I know we're close enough now, coming in fast enough now, that we're going to make the airport. That was the main thing. Whether we actually made the runway or not, I don't know.
The aircraft is still traveling much faster than normal, but the crew cannot delay any longer. This is their only shot at a landing.
Get on the brakes with me.
Yeah.
They will have only minimal braking power and reverse thrust to stop the plane on the ground. They won't be able to steer. No pilot at the controls of a commercial jetliner has ever landed a DC-10 safely at this speed, with or without flight controls.
Pull the power back. That's right, pull the left one back.
You could hear people crying, and every once in a while you could hear people kind of scream a little bit. And I remember at the end thinking, all right, there's nothing else I can do to get ready here. Now I just got to see what happens, see what unfolds.
The plane is 30 seconds from landing.
Brace, brace, brace. Had no idea what was going to happen when we touched down. We were going way too fast. We had no flaps. We had no brakes. And we had no way to steer the airplane once we did arrive at the runway.
At the very bottom, I was hoping to do the pitch up by putting more power in, pulling the nose up, causing the whole belly to become drag. into the wind and slow us down so that we would touch down on the landing gear and then rolled on the runway.
Only 100 feet from the ground, the nose dips again, increasing its already dangerous speed.
The nose lowered, the airspeed would get built up again, and the right wing started to go down again. And we couldn't have that. We had to try and get it level.
Close the throttles.
Close them off. Pull them all off.
I can't pull them off or we'll lose it. That's what's turning you.
And we both said, okay, he's in charge of the throttles, do whatever you have to do. There had to be complete trust.
Okay. Left, Royal, left.
We're turning.
Didn't get it quite right. And we hit very hard. My head smashed down into the radio rack in front of me. It's just like somebody had a giant hand on the back of my head and just was forcing me face down into this rack.
We have hit just incredibly hard. I don't think for all the thoughts about what it might be like that I was ready for that impact. I could feel the plane go upside down, and then we slid upside down and backwards for what seemed like forever.
I remember looking out the window and saw it got blue for a split second, darkened again to brown and green, and then more violence than I can put in words.
Three months after United Flight 232 crash-landed in Sioux City, Iowa, a farmer finds the crucial piece of the puzzle lying in her field about 60 miles from the airport.
This was a hole. I came across the combine, and the combine met with resistance. I backed up and I thought, oh my gosh, this is it.
The massive disc is broken into two pieces.
How could it break like that?
The titanium alloy used to make this vital part is extremely strong and resilient. It shouldn't just snap in two.
Take a look at this. Didn't happen overnight.
A close examination of the broken part reveals surprising evidence of why it fractured.
It's definitely fatigue. Can you cut me a small section from here?
Investigators need to know what had weakened this powerful alloy. They trace the fracture back to where it began and remove the section for testing.
Well.
They find elements that should not be in the metal. Nitrogen and oxygen mixed in with the titanium.
A bad batch of titanium? I'd say so.
Investigators conclude that a microscopic imperfection in the titanium used to make the fan blade caused a crack that developed slowly over 17 years. The NTSB immediately recommends more thorough inspections of all engine fan discs. Titanium is now melted 3 times in a vacuum to remove impurities. The DC-10's hydraulic system also gets an upgrade. Designers add a series of valves so that a line can be sealed in case of a rupture.
Every accident is a learning experience. And Sioux City, although it was several decades ago, it continues to be a learning experience.
Between the frigid waters of Cook Inlet and the towering Alaskan mountains, Anchorage International Airport awaits the arrival of a stricken 747.
Northwest 85, we have you on our radar.
The passengers and crew of Northwest 85 are now moments away from an emergency landing.
As I was putting my own seatbelt on, I remember thinking to myself, is this all there is? As in, am I done here? Am I going to be alive when this is over? And I thought about my kids and my husband and my home.
Northwest 85, clear to land. Emergency equipment standing by.
Roger, cleared to land.
the crew still has no idea what will happen when the plane touches the ground.
There were close to 400 passengers in that airplane and a crew of 18, and some of them people that I knew personally, like John and the other pilots in the crew. So waiting was hard.
Okay, everyone, here we go.
Touchdown in 5.
Prepare for impact.
Brake! Brake! Brake!
You got it? I got it.
As planned, on touchdown, First Officer Fagan takes the control column. Captain Hansen guides the front wheels with the tiller. The timing is critical. One false step, and the plane could shoot off the runway.
We got it. Good job, Mike. Good job, guys.
Oh.
So what do we do for encore?
Not that.
Everyone in the cockpit was finally able to exhale. And we just went, oh.
Once we were given the signal that it was okay,
Please remain seated until the seatbelt light is off.
I knew that I had to get up and go to that entry door and get these people out of this airplane. We did what we were trained to do. We did a great job.
Controllers can see what the pilots can't.
That's quite the rudder you got there. Must have been a hell of a ride.
Oh, yeah, it was a real joyride.
Almost 2 hours after the emergency began at 35,000 feet, all 404 people on board are safely on the ground.
Well, when I heard the crew was safe, of course, it was an incredible sense of relief. These guys had been tested, and they'd done a fabulous job. So, you know, it was really joyful. I mean, a sense of grace, accomplishment, joy, satisfaction. It was all good.
We still don't know actually the root cause of the Northwest failure. But because of what we found with the second Air France failure, we needed to take corrective action to prevent similar failures from occurring.
Investigators recommend attaching special plugs to the control module. In the event of another failure, these new pieces will prevent the rudder from moving too far in either direction.
The changes that we've made to the control modules in the 747-400 fleet will prevent any future events of a rudder hardover.
An airworthiness directive from the FAA makes it mandatory for every 747-400 to be fitted with this new technology, eliminating the risk of another failure. But still, there is another question to consider. One investigators seldom have the luxury to contemplate. With a catastrophic failure of the rudder system, why didn't Flight 85 crash? One reason: the very design of this 747.
Having a split rudder is definitely an unusual feature of this airplane. And in this case, it worked in their favor in the sense that if there had only been one rudder and the actuator of that rudder had failed, then 100% of the yaw control would have been deflected, which would have magnified the problem.
But technology alone didn't save 404 lives. In 1985, China Airlines Flight 006 also went into a sudden roll. But that flight plummeted nearly 30,000 feet before the pilots were able to regain control. How had Flight 85 escaped the same fate?
If Frank hadn't reacted the way he had, we probably would not be here to tell the story.
Frank, have you got it?
Yes, I think I've got it.
Captain Guy's actions in the first few seconds were critical to saving the plane. But what got it safely to the ground is another story.
Every pilot in that cockpit knew what was going on. Risks were being assessed and so on.
On landing.
Don't forget the rudders attached to the nose steering.
And when that happens, Mike, I'll take the tiller and the brakes, and you take the yoke.
Cockpit resource management is really what enabled us to think this thing through and get the airplane on the ground.
I am proud to say we were like a well-oiled machine. We all did what we were trained to do.
Touchdown in 5. Prepare for impact.
And not one single person fell apart.
What do we tell the captain?
Guys that we had in the cockpit were just tremendous. Everybody communicated.
I'll go back and tell them. The more they know, the better. I agree. I think we should tell them exactly what's going on.
I think this crew did a phenomenal job in getting this aircraft back on the ground safely.
In 2003, the Airline Pilots Association awarded the crew of Northwest Airlines Flight 85 with the Superior Airmanship Award.
More important than the award was the fact that we got the people on the ground safely.
We got it.
In this day and age of automated cockpits, hand flying is in danger of becoming a lost art. We have to remember as pilots that we are there because of our flying skills. We had prepared so well for this thing that the failure was not an option.
They're going to bring everybody in on 26 or 27.
Okie dokie.
Autopilot off.
Continental Express Flight 2574 and its 11 passengers nears the end of its 1-hour flight from Laredo to Houston, Texas. It's the second flight of the day for this crew. They have already flown from Houston to Laredo. Now they're on their way back. 15,000 feet below, it's a warm, late summer morning on the farms and cattle ranches of southern Texas.
Captured on the right.
The pilots prepare the Embraer 120 Brasilia for another routine landing. Captain Brad Patridge is just 29 years old. 43-year-old First Officer Clint Radosevich is very close to becoming a captain himself. They're less than 70 miles from Houston, home for both pilots.
Pushing this descent, making like the space shuttle.
High speed, oil. High
In the blink of an eye, the plane is plummeting towards the ground. It drops 2,000 feet in just a few seconds. Far below, Kerry LeBay and his brother Clifton are working on their farm.
My brother and I heard the explosion. We both looked up in the air, and it was, oh my God, look. Seen a plane coming out of the air. The plane was spiraling.
Flight 2574 plummets to the ground at more than 300 miles an hour.
Engine.
Ten bodies were found inside the wreckage, 4 outside.
All 14 people on board, including Patridge and Radosevich, are dead.
The NTSB blames the accident on the failure to reinsert all the screws holding the left leading edge to the tail.
My heart reached out to the people that had worked on the airplane because I knew this was a human error. And whoever had been involved in that maintenance, I'm sure, was going to feel very badly about the situation.
The Safety Board also takes the unprecedented step of faulting Continental Express for not making sure all maintenance procedures were followed. Now that the leading edge has been found, investigators believe they finally have all the pieces of the plane.
We were really excited because it's important. You want to do your best to understand what happened in an accident. And if you didn't have the key part, there would always be questions.
Right away, they noticed something unusual.
The evidence indicated that the leading edge upper surface holes were absolutely clean, no elongation, no damage.
But the holes that hold the piece to the bottom of the stabilizer look quite different.
The lower surface holes onto the leading edge were elongated, they were cracked, as if you have pulled it through the fasteners.
The missing piece was found over 1,000 yards southwest of the tail section. There is no question it was the first piece to fall off the plane.
See, look here, look here. Absolutely perfect on top, but destroyed at the bottom.
The fact that the screw holes on the top of the leading edge aren't damaged presents a frightening prospect.
It looked like there was no screws attached onto the top surface of the horizontal stabilizer leading edge.
The discovery presents the team with two important questions. Why were the screws missing? And
could losing this actually cause the plane to crash?
The leading edge improves the aerodynamics of the plane, but it's not a moving part that controls direction. It's hard to see how losing it would cause the plane to plummet from the sky.
At that time, I was kind of surprised that losing a composite leading edge would actually cause such a severe impact.
Now that all the pieces of the plane have been found, the investigation moves to NTSB headquarters in Washington, D.C.
Well, we were just trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together and try to make sure that we understood what the motion of the airplane was after the leading edge radius broke off.
The horizontal stabilizer is like an upside-down wing. It pushes the tail down while the wings lift it up. Reducing the force on the stabilizer lifts the tail and makes the flight unstable.
There were still questions about maybe it would still be controllable, and so we did an engineering simulation to try to see if maybe there was a way that the airplane could still fly after it lost the leading edge. But we found that it really was not a controllable situation. After the leading edge radius broke off of the airplane, it was a negative 5G pitch over. Once the angle of attack exceeded the negative limits, it actually broke the wing apart. And so it was not a survivable event.
The simulations are conclusive. Losing just one leading edge along the horizontal stabilizer will send the plane into a catastrophic nosedive. Precisely what witnesses say happened to Flight 2574.
If there's any component of the wing that you don't want to lose, it's the leading edge.
The team now knows what triggered the crash, the loss of the stabilizer's leading edge. Amid growing confusion in the cockpit, the pilots of Flight 2120 still don't know that there's smoke in the cabin.
All they're dealing with is just all the alarm bells going off to indicate that equipment is failing left, right, and center.
But mechanic Jean-Paul Philippe realizes they're in serious trouble. An onboard fire has the potential to consume the entire aircraft in seconds.
So things are rapidly spinning out of control.
Okay, let's get squared away and see what we've got here, please.
In the cabin, it's becoming almost impossible to breathe. And Jeddah is still 11 miles away.
You've lost all hydraulics.
The odds on making it back to the airport are getting slimmer.
Damn it! I've got no ailerons!
Davidge can't steer the plane with no hydraulics.
Okay, hang on, I've got it.
Captain Allen struggles with his control
Hang
column,
on.
but it too could fail at any moment.
Let's get lined up before things get any worse. Okay, so we're at 2,000 feet now, declaring an emergency. We are having flight control problems.
Roger, I thought you were Southeast 738.
Only now does the controller realize that the troubled aircraft is the Nation Air flight.
Turn left right now, heading
080, expect runway 34 left.
By this time, it's pandemonium inside the cabin. Passengers are being engulfed by flames, and bodies are starting to fall from the aircraft fuselage.
The plane is right over Jeddah, a city of 2 million people.
Bodies were falling out of the aircraft 11 miles from the airport.
Okay, sir, we're having trouble turning. We are having flight control problems. We will try to turn left. We are having flight control problems.
In the situation, it would have made certainly controlling the aircraft for an approach and landing very, very difficult.
How much further? 10 miles. 1,700 feet.
Choking for air, some passengers try to open the doors. At this speed, it's impossible.
Jeddah 2120, clear to land runway 34 left.
Okay, we're coming straight in. We'll land on the left. Require emergency vehicles immediately. We have a fire. We will be ground evacuating.
Jeddah 2120, clear to land any runway. Clear to land.
There it is, it's 2 miles out. All right, let's get on the ground. I've lost elevators. Christ, I have no control. Landing gear down.
The fiery explosion and sudden impact with the ground has all but obliterated Flight 2120. "247 passengers and 14 crew members are dead. This is the worst accident ever for a Canadian airline, and the deadliest crash of a DC-8 in history. At the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Forensics Lab, technicians have analyzed the Nation Air maintenance log. Tests reveal 2 layers of ink on the log entries.
The readings for the tire pressure were written over, and the actual readings that were underneath showed 20 to 30 psi below the required levels to operate the plane and tires safely. So the only conclusion that you could make from that is that the entries were falsified.
Tell me what the plan was for the tires.
With this troubling new information, investigators now turn their attention to the mechanics who last worked on the plane. They learned that 4 days before the crash, at a stop in Ghana, Africa, mechanics wanted to change the tires. The tread was beginning to wear and the pressure was low. The investigative team wants to learn more about how Nation Air managed day-to-day maintenance. Bill Taylor is joined by operations expert Larry Vance.
What we did was look at all the operational issues, and we looked at human factors, basically everything that had to do with the operation of the aircraft.
You're not going to believe what I just found.
Taylor uncovers evidence that the tire change was never carried out. A fax from the Nationair project manager in Jeddah ordered it stopped so the plane could stay on schedule.
They had a facsimile come in from the project manager.
Forget it. They want us to get going.
Saying that some of their passengers were being given off to other carriers, which put some pressure on them to abandon their plan to change the wheels.
It was felt it would have caused a greater delay.
So the fax came in and said, stop the tire change. We're way behind. We may lose the contract. Load everybody up and get back. And so they did. They stopped the work. Because Nationair is go, 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 go. Nobody wants to deal with anything that could delay the departure.
Rather than top up the tires, a mechanic altered the log to make it seem like the tire pressure was fine.
There's no indication that they ever added pressure to the tires to actually inflate them to that. They just simply made the books look right.
"11 tons of jet fuel feed a massive fire where a Boeing MD-87 has collided with an airport building.
Awful, terrible devastation, the collapse of a roof of the hangar, and the saucer plane completely destroyed in many different parts, and unfortunately the dead bodies. The rescue people had problems to enter a cargo building to rescue victims because the airplanes was blocking the entrance.
Some 14 minutes have passed since the crash. As emergency crews battle the fire, Lanate air traffic controllers frantically try to understand what just happened.
There are 2 aircraft unaccounted for.
Paolo Zacchetti discovers a private Cessna Citation did not return to its parking position after all planes were grounded.
The main attention was focused on the saucer plane, and so nobody thought that there was another plane.
A private aircraft is missing, a Cessna 525.
Ground crews search for the missing plane. Finally, 26 minutes after the crash, they find the Cessna burning and in pieces halfway down runway 36R. It appears there's been a collision.
It's hard to believe that after half an hour, people became aware about the fact that the Cessna was on the main runway.
There is another aircraft in the accident near Romeo 6.
Air traffic controllers are mystified. How did these 2 planes end up on the same runway at the same time?
What's that? Come on.
Two planes are destroyed. A hangar is in ruins. The scope of the tragedy is overwhelming. It's soon clear that no one from either plane has survived. The crash has killed 110 people on the SAS flight, and 4 on board the Cessna. Inside the collapsed hangar, 4 more people have died. 118 fatalities in all. The Cessna took the wrong path due to flawed taxiway markings. Without ground radar, controllers couldn't properly monitor the movement of the Cessna. Add fog into the mix, and disaster was inevitable.
When the Cessna and the SAS aircraft started moving, they were both doomed. The accident was now inevitable.
How long was it before the general alarm was sounded?
The investigation begins to uncover evidence of how failures at Linate Airport made for a bad situation.
Please call me back entering the main taxiway.
Even worse,
Hello, this is Tower.
The wreckage of the Cessna was found only about 25 minutes after the accident. And by the time the fire brigade arrived on the scene, all the occupants were dead.
post-mortem exams confirmed that 3 people in the Cessna had high concentrations of smoke in their lungs. They were still alive after being hit by the MD-87.
They were burned alive. If the rescue to the Cessna had arrived earlier, certainly the 2 pilots would have survived the accident.
After more than 6 months of painstaking investigation, Mario Pica delivers his findings. Though runway incursion by the Cessna is listed as the immediate cause of the accident, Pica does not entirely blame the Cessna pilot. Instead, he points to the lack of proper signage and taxiway markings at Linate, as well as to the airport's failings overall.
Delta Victor X-ray, taxi north via Romeo 5. Call me back at the stop bar of the main runway extension.
And for some of the people involved, the fallout is especially harsh. Ground Controller Paolo Zacchetti, along with high-ranking officials from the agencies which oversee Linate, are handed prison sentences. The judgment sparked intense debate. Should human error in air accidents be considered a criminal act?
I defined the ground controller as the 119th victim of the case.
Delta Victor X-ray, continue your taxi on the main apron.
Roger.
Yes, it is true he did make a mistake, but he is the result of a system that failed.
Because of the tragedy, Linate Airport underwent a major overhaul designed to improve safety.
Linate improved the airport by installing the ground radar, and some of the markings and signage was repainted.
The reforms ushered in following the collision on 36R have made runway collisions far less likely and made Linate a much safer airport. Flight 8509 takes off from Stansted Airport at 6:36 p.m.
Positive rate confirmed.
Gear up.
Gear up. Passing 900 feet.
The aircraft had taken off and climbed to about 2,500 feet.
Shortly after takeoff, the aircraft was making a turn.
Left turn at 1.5 DME.
Copy that. Left turn at 1.5 DME.
The aircraft started its turn to the left.
Heading standby, sir. Heading 158.
The captain's artificial horizon tells him that the plane isn't turning.
Bank's not working.
Bank! Bank! Look! Bank!
For some reason, the 747 has gone from takeoff to total destruction in less than 60 seconds. AAIB technicians have salvaged the recording from the badly damaged CVR.
대답해. 얼마나 연결될 것인지 그들이 묻고 있어. 네가 말하기 전에 그들이 무엇을 말하고 있었는지 확실해.
One of the most important things that was on that recorder was the sound of a warning horn going off in the cockpit as the aircraft departed from Stansted.
But even more significant than the sound of the alarm is what is not on the tape.
They seem to be ignoring the alarms completely.
There was no discussion about the fault with the artificial horizon.
Crews are trained to trust their instruments and not their senses. Captain Park trusted his ADI in spite of overwhelming evidence that it was wrong.
The first officer should have said to the captain, look at the warning buzzers going off. It's very difficult to understand his reactions or lack of reactions. But I think a lot of it is embedded within the culture I was at that time.
Fearing dishonor more than death itself, the first officer did not dare criticize his captain or even attempt to correct his actions.
This crew were not operating as a crew, they were operating as one man with a couple of assistants.
The aircraft just continued to roll for 30 degrees, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 degrees of bank.
Investigators now suspect that the seeds of the deadly crash were sown hundreds of years before the 747 ever left the ground.
Sir.
For centuries, a rigid class structure based on social hierarchy defined Korean culture. Investigators have come to see how the Korean military, an honor-bound institution, has strongly influenced commercial aviation. It's now clear that strict adherence to cultural norms put the crew of Korean Air 8509 in danger from the moment they entered the cockpit. Gary Dan is enjoying the Christmas holiday at his home just north of London.
I told you I don't like them.
It was a Christmassy family get-together. It was just exchanging of presents. And that's when I heard the noise of the plane coming over. It got louder and louder. It was almost like the plane was going to take the chimneys off. It felt and heard the noise that close to the house.
Living just a mile and a half from Stansted Airport, Dan is used to hearing jets, but not this close.
I looked out the window, saw the plane coming over with fire coming out of the engines. As it came over, it sort of banked heavily left, and then just kept banking and banking.
A Korean Air 747 slams into a forest in the village of Great Hollingbury.
This was just a huge, huge explosion that you're watching it happen with a plume of fire coming towards you. I collected a torch. We ran downstairs saying, the plane's gone down, we've got to go and help. My brother and I ran outside and ran towards where it happened. We were racing towards where we could see the plume of smoke and fire because there's still lots of aviation fuel popping around the area. We ran and jumped into a very large crater, just shouting out,
Hello!
You know, any survivors, please shout.
Hello! Can anybody hear me?
We dialed 999.
A plane's gone down in Hatfield Forest in Great Hollingbury.
It takes nearly half an hour for rescue workers to arrive. They quickly determine that there are no survivors. A multi-million-dollar plane and thousands of pounds of cargo are completely destroyed. Aero Air Flight 1285 is nearing the end of a 6,000-mile journey from Egypt to the United States. The DC-8 is on its way to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, via Germany and Newfoundland. On board are 8 crew members and 248 passengers. Most of them are U.S. soldiers with the famed 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles. At 5:30 in the morning, the Douglas DC-8 lands at Gander International Airport on the eastern edge of Newfoundland, Canada.
They had to refuel in Gander before they could complete the flight into Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Gander Tower.
Big A950, we've completed refueling and pre-flight checks. Requesting taxi to runway 31.
Big A950, winds at 290 at 4 knots. Takeoff now, runway 22.
A last-minute change puts Aero Air on a different runway than originally planned.
9,900 feet, take off to the south, we're good.
Copy that, Gander, runway 22.
Big A950, you are cleared for takeoff.
Merry Christmas.
Roger that, Gander Tower. And a Merry Christmas to you, too.
The DC-8 accelerates to takeoff speed.
80 knots. Check. B1. Rotate.
Aero Air 1285 lifts off from Gander Airport at 6:46 a.m. But just seconds later,
She's flying like a pig. Positive rate?
Negative.
I'm sure for the last few seconds, those soldiers knew that there was a serious problem in hand.
What's your altitude? Pull up.
Come on, airspeed. Airspeed!
Watch the trees.
First Officer Conley pulled the nose back, trying to get the plane in the air. What he didn't realize was he was sealing their fate. The DC-8 was already on the verge of a stall. Pulling the nose up only made things worse. The aircraft's weight had been underestimated. Its lift compromised by ice on the wings. A fatal combination.
If you take one of the factors out, if you take the ice out and have the same weight, maybe you don't have the accident. If you take out the heavy weight and still have the icing, maybe you won't have the accident. But if you have them combined together, you have the accident.
The crash of Flight 1285 in Gander, Newfoundland. Investigators examine and document the crash site, trying to determine the trajectory of the plane as it went down.
And we're going to need pictures of the treetops as well. And we're going to need aerial shots. "35 feet, 6 inches, 4.5-degree declination."
Using photographs from the crash site, investigators plot the height of 378 trees to determine the DC-8's exact position as it went down.
The airplane was right wing low with a nose high attitude relative to the trees. Through photogrammetry, we determined that in fact the aircraft was way above the stall angle of the aircraft. So the aircraft was clearly stalled in a high rate of descent.
The plane's radical nose-up position prevented it from getting the lift needed to keep it in the air. Investigators can't explain why the plane was flying at such an extreme angle. One clue about what the pilots were doing comes from a piece of cockpit wreckage, the airspeed indicator.
Look here. Here's the bug at 140.
It shows that the crew set a takeoff speed of 144 knots.
Say 165.
And that the plane reached an airspeed of at least 165 knots. Their hopes now rest with the flight data recorder.
The recorder for the Aero Air accident was extremely limited. We were able to determine, first of all, speed, a little bit of altitude, and heading of the aircraft. And there was no indication on there of engine power, bank angle, pitch angle.
The flight data recorder tells investigators that Aero Air 1285 began its takeoff roll and increased to a speed of 167 knots. Liftoff occurred 51 seconds from the start of the roll. 2 seconds later, the speed began to decrease.
It tells us almost nothing.
But a closer look at the flight data does reveal a potentially valuable clue. The distance needed to get to takeoff speed was longer than the pilots had planned for.
We looked at the acceleration distances, and it took a little bit longer than expected.
4,300 feet, 100 knots. 6,300 feet, 144 knots.
They should be lifting off now.
Investigators discover that liftoff occurred some 4 seconds later, or more than 1,000 feet further than it should have.
8,000 feet, 167 knots.
Extra 1,000 feet to get off the ground.
Why did it take them so long?
B1. Rotate.
They used the full power, and we would expect them to rotate a little earlier, take off a little earlier.
The longer than normal takeoff supports the original theory that ice on the wings played a role in the crash, but investigators know that can't be the whole story. It's a rough ride aboard a 737 on descent to New Orleans. A violent thunderstorm has caught the pilots off guard.
Ask the flight attendants to take their seats.
Flight attendants, please take your seats.
Suddenly, less than 17,000 feet from the ground, the flight becomes all the more terrifying.
We've lost power on the engines. I've got nothing.
The plane has enough speed to glide, but not for long. It will rapidly lose altitude as it does. The crew has only one option left.
I guess I'm gonna have to make a ditching here, sir.
They must take their chances and put the plane down on the water.
Tackle 110, roger. Whatever you need to do, sir.
And that was about the last communication with the tower. Then we were like 1,500 feet when that was going on.
Dardano plans to put the plane down in the canal directly ahead of him.
Okay. There. Put it down softly.
The 737 can only stay in the air for another minute. As Dardano looks for a safe stretch of canal to drop the plane in, another option appears.
Look at that one over there.
And then Lopez saw the levee parallel to the canal that we were making the approach on.
Can you put it down on the grass? Yes, boss.
The levee is much shorter and narrower than a runway, but it looks safer than the water.
That's where we're going to go in? You got it, my friend. Okay, put the gear down. All right.
But Captain Dardano is still flying towards the water. To have any hope of landing on the levee, he needs to make a sudden and dramatic course correction. That requires a risky maneuver known as a side slip.
So we just had to do a little bit side slip to get into position to make a perfect landing.
It's a move meant for small planes and gliders, not a 47-ton Boeing 737. But it's a risk he has to take.
Agarrate, papá.
Only 700 feet separate the plane from the ground. Without engines, the pilots have no thrust reversers to slow the plane when it touches down. Dardano has an additional challenge. With only one eye, he's unable to gauge depth as he speeds towards the narrow, rain-soaked strip of grass. There's a high cement wall in front of the levee and a steep embankment on the left. There may not be enough room to land.
Watch out for the wing on that side. I see it. Come on. Aquí te tengo, baby. Aquí te tengo.
Very good. Very good. Very good, Charlie.
El aterrizaje fue espectacular. El avión
The landing was
aterrizó
spectacular. The plane landed so smoothly. There wasn't even a bit of turbulence.
No hubo ninguna ni media turbulencia.
A perfect
Un aterrizaje
landing.
perfecto.
When the engines on the 737 flamed out, the crew knew they had to act fast.
We lost power on the engines.
To have any hope of restoring engine power, they needed to first get the APU running.
The APU started.
Since the engines were no longer spinning, they had stopped ingesting air and water. But a successful restart was far from guaranteed.
If you do not have all the proper conditions, you can get what's called a hot start, which means that you have too much fuel for the amount of air going into it, and the flame will now migrate into the turbine where it could overheat it.
After studying the engine data from the flight recorder, investigators conclude that the overheating and ultimate failure of the engines was in fact due to a hot start.
Mayday, mayday, Tucker 110. We lost an engine.
Both engines.
Both engines, sir. Both engines.
With his engines flooded with fuel and no time to properly drain them, Dardano hit the ignition switch.
If it didn't get all the timing correctly, then this is what's going to happen. You're going to get a hot start. I can't be critical of a pilot in that condition. That aircraft is coming down.
Rain and hail from an intense storm crippled a modern passenger jet and nearly led to disaster. Investigators must find a way to make sure it never happens again.
One of the beauties of aviation and aviation safety is when we find there's a problem, everybody works together to solve it. And in this case, the problem indicated a need for an engine change, not a complete design overhaul, but just a few tweaks. But that was done almost immediately, much to the credit of everybody involved.
The shape of the engine nose cone and the spacing of the fan blades are modified in order to better deflect hail away from the core. Also, additional bleed doors are added to drain more water from the engine.
That sort of thing hasn't happened again, and there are thousands and thousands of these engines flying every day for hours and hours and hours.
Within a year of the incident, 737-300s around the world are retrofitted with the upgrades. The plane involved in the daring landing is back in service within a month.
Look at that one over there. That's where we're going to go in?
You got it, my friend.
The crew's actions on Flight 110 are legendary in the aviation world.
The decision-making at the very end, when they were going to put it in the canal and saw an opportunity to put it on dry ground and did so, that was superlative. It was the decision-making.
Investigators credit the calm nerves and determination of Captain
Watch out for
Dardano
the wing on that side.
I see it.
for avoiding what could have been a fatal disaster. Captain Carlos Dardano is dubbed a hero in the media.
Passengers that day were overjoyed. Dardano and his crew kept the calm. And because of that, 45 people who rode that plane are alive today.
Cold Bay, Alaska. A frontier town at the tip of the Alaskan Peninsula, surrounded by the Aleutian Mountains and hundreds of miles of ocean. Revolution Airlines is one of Cold Bay's only links to the outside world. It operates a small fleet of rugged planes carrying people and cargo across the state and beyond. Revolution Airlines Flight 8 prepares to leave Cold Bay for Seattle, Washington. The route will take the flight over a wide stretch of the North Pacific Ocean. 54-year-old Captain James Gibson is a hardened bush pilot with more than 25 years' experience flying Alaska's tough terrain.
Set takeoff thrust.
Gibson's flight engineer
Thrust set.
is 45-year-old Alaskan Gerald Moose Lauren. His first officer is 39-year-old Gary Lintner.
Generally, we flew that route once a week. On this particular day, we were scheduled for 5 hours of flying time.
Gear up.
Gear up.
Flaps up, Gear.
Flaps up. Rev8 is off the ground, about 2-3.
Rev8, roger, and have a good flight.
There are 10 passengers on board, mostly hunters and anglers. Wendy Kroon is the senior flight attendant.
We were headed to Seattle. It was a beautiful day. It was clear, no turbulence. Highly unusual, highly unusual. There should have been turbulence.
Pacific winds in the nearby Aleutian Mountains often create turbulent skies. Captain Gibson will cross the North Pacific aboard a Lockheed L-188 Electra, powered by 4 turboprop engines.
They're just an incredibly tough airplane. Stronger than 10 acres of garlic, I used to always say.
Gibson finishes turning his aircraft on course towards Seattle when he hears an unusual buzzing sound.
You hear that, Gare?
I do. Not sure. I noticed that the vibration that I was feeling in my feet and the vibration that was in the glass was different. And that's the first time I'd ever come across that. And I thought, well, this is a little different.
The hell? Moose, have a look, would you?
Yeah, you bet.
As Gibson and Lintner wait for Moose Lauren to report back, the vibrations become more pronounced.
I distinctly remember looking down and seeing my control yoke shaking. And I turned to Jim and I said, Jesus, look at this. And Jim and I are kind of looking at each other across the cockpit. And finally he says,
well, screw this. Let's turn around.
Meanwhile, Wendy Kroon helps Lauren check the engines.
The engineer said, I want you to come back and check number 4 engine and see if you can see anything. And just as I looked out the window, the engine went.
It's now up to NTSB investigator Ron Schleid to find out what went wrong.
The loss of a propeller in flight is a very serious event. It can lead to catastrophic accident. It has led to catastrophic accidents in the past.
Though the Revolution accident was not catastrophic, it is part of a disturbing trend. Since 1965, there have been 4 cases of spontaneous propeller loss on the Electra L-188.
We had an airplane that nearly went into the ocean because a propeller came off. So we needed to find out as best as we could what caused this accident.
For Schleid, there are only 2 possible causes that can explain the loss of the propeller.
A fatigue crack or some other pre-existing damage would cause the whole propeller assembly to separate, and that has happened before. The other possibility is the gearbox, the powered gears that drive the propeller. If there's a catastrophic failure there, that can also cause the engine or the propeller assembly and gearbox to separate. That has also happened in the past.
His team studies what's left of the damaged engine. Right away, it's clear his investigation will be difficult.
The wreckage really didn't give us much of a clue because what we needed to look at was gone.
With no physical evidence to examine, Schleid's team studies the plane's flight data recorder, hoping it can explain the vibration.
The flight recorder on this airplane was a very rudimentary recorder. It records by a stylus scraping a metal foil. And so it's not a very scientific thing compared to what we have today. So we could not, on the flight recorder, determine where the vibration came from.
The Electra has a history of engine vibration. Vibration so serious, it's been known to tear the plane apart at high speed. Investigators examine the rubber mounts designed to absorb those vibrations. If they're worn down, it could explain the accident. But the mounts check out. the investigation hits another dead end.
We could not determine even a probable cause in this case. When you can't do that and have to say, I don't know, that's very hard for an investigator to say.
But there is another question Schleid hopes he can answer. Why was Gibson's plane so hard to land? In 4 other cases, when an Electra's propeller separated, the planes landed without incident.
The loss of a propeller is not necessarily catastrophic. It's designed to fly with only half its engines.
Yet with 3 engines intact, Gibson could barely maintain control of his plane. Something made this case unique. Flight 592 has crashed into one of the most inhospitable spots on Earth, the Florida Everglades.
A large jet aircraft has just crashed out here. Large, like airliner size. Need to get your choppers in the air.
The Everglades covers much of the southern tip of Florida. Hundreds of square miles of shallow swamp, mangroves, and watery grassland. Just getting to the crash site will be a huge challenge for rescuers. Miami-Dade police helicopters find the wreckage of ValueJet Flight 592 in swampland far from the nearest highway.
Federal safety officials say it's the most difficult recovery operation they've ever faced, with wreckage strewn like confetti in a muddy, alligator-infested swamp that can only be reached by helicopter or airboat.
The very waterous, marshy area, and that's proving difficult to reach people that may have survived this crash.
Rescuers know that the first hours of this rescue operation are critical. In 1972, Eastern Airlines Flight 401 crashed into the Everglades, 3 miles from the ValueJet crash site. Several passengers drowned before rescuers could reach them.
Yeah, to be in the Everglades after the crash, it was utter devastation, destruction. The smell, you could smell the jet fuel. You could smell the hydraulic fluid. You could smell death.
Most of the aircraft is sunk beneath the surface of the swamp.
The wreckage was in the Everglades. It's a hostile environment. It wasn't clear at that point how much we'd be able to learn from the wreckage or be able to recover.
We suited up as best as possible. We first put on that Tyvek suit, and then we put on an extra sleeve, put 2 surgical gloves on, put a pair of work gloves on, and then they duct taped the work gloves to the Tyvek suit.
The heavy gear protects rescuers from spilled fuel and other toxins. But below the surface of the swamp lurks an even deadlier threat.
They had to have a sharpshooter on top of the airboat at all times.
The crash site is a nesting grounds for alligators.
As the divers were walking in the water, if somebody sighted an alligator or you'd hear them hiss in the sawgrass, they would take pot shots to try and scare them away.
Just hours after the crash, officials come to a grim conclusion.
It doesn't look good that there are any survivors.
At an FAA fire test facility,
okay, let's do this.
They hope to recreate the fire that consumed Flight 592.
1 minute to ignition.
We had to trigger one of the oxygen generators manually.
Nothing at all. We didn't really get much of a fire.
An activated oxygen generator isn't enough to set fire to the cardboard box it's packed in.
So how'd these things start a fire?
NTSB investigators are back at square one. They can't prove their theory.
What were these things packed in?
The failure of the fire test prompts investigators to look more closely at exactly how the oxygen generators were packaged for transport.
The first test we did, we had not packed them exactly the way they were packed.
I need a layer of bubble wrap.
We did not use bubble wrap in the first test. That is, put bubble wrap over the top of the generators before we closed the box. We put 5 boxes of oxygen generators, put them on top of a tire, and put some luggage around them.
Okay, let's start it up.
It made an unbelievable noise. It was a high-pitched scream. We all looked at each other. We were kind of startled. I mean, the sound was deafening.
Ten minutes after ignition, the ceiling of the test cargo container reaches 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Lord almighty.
We almost destroyed their test facility.
After 11 minutes, it exceeds the capacity of the monitoring equipment.
All right, let's get that fire out.
We had a raging fire, and none of us had expected a fire to be that big and that hot. And it was just amazing to see how disastrous, how destructive something this long and that big around could be.
The experiment supports the NTSB theory. Improperly packaged oxygen generators caused the crash of ValueJet 592. Singapore Airlines Flight 6 taxis to the runway through heavy wind and rain at Taipei's Chiang Kai-shek Airport. Taiwan sits inside Asia's infamous Typhoon Alley, and tonight, the island nation is bracing for the worst. Typhoon Jiangsing, with winds of 99 miles an hour, is closing in fast. Flight 6 needs to get airborne before the brunt of the storm hits. There are 179 people on board the overnight flight to Los Angeles, including business traveler Francois Perron.
Being a frequent flyer, I was not too concerned about the weather because that didn't bother me in the past.
Perron has requested an aisle seat. The only one available on this flight is in row 65, the second to the last row of the plane. He has no idea how important his seating assignment will become.
Singapore 6, for your information, surface wind 020 at 24, gust 43.
Thank you, sir. Singapore 6.
Let me know when it hits 30.
If the crosswind hits 30 knots, the crew will have to abandon their takeoff.
Singapore 6, you are cleared for takeoff, runway 05 left.
Okay, thrust left, toga, toga.
Captain Fu Chi Kong decides to proceed with the takeoff.
Okay, my control.
The 747 accelerates towards takeoff speed, 180 miles an hour.
V1.
V1.
As the plane was gaining speed to take off, at a certain time, the plane kind of lost it.
plane's tanks are loaded with 15,000 gallons of fuel. It ignites immediately.
Direct emergency vehicles to runway 05 left.
Rescuers must battle both the flames and the violent storm. The massive 747 is broken into pieces. Of the 179 passengers and crew, 83 are dead. Most victims were seated in the middle of the plane, where the fuel-fed fire was most severe. The 96 survivors include all 3 pilots, some passengers in first class, and everyone in the rear section, where Francois Perron was seated. One of Asia's busiest airports is immediately closed. It is now up to the Aviation Safety Council of Taiwan to determine the cause of the disaster. Taiwanese investigators still can't answer why the crew of Singapore Airlines Flight 6 made the fatal error of turning onto the wrong runway. Determined to find out what went wrong on Flight 6, investigators decide to put themselves in the pilot's seat, the cockpit of a 747 at Chiang Kai-shek Airport.
All right, let's get going.
In similar weather conditions, they follow the route taken by Flight 6. They taxi slowly towards runway 5 left, matching Captain Fung's speed. The plane turns onto the final taxiway. From this point, the Flight 6 crew should have taxied past runway 5 right, towards the turn for runway 5 left.
Now we continue on to 5 right. How could they have missed that sign? It's huge.
Signs marking 5 right are clearly visible from the cockpit. But investigators see nothing that would tell a pilot the runway is out of service. But inside the cockpit, there is an indication that the plane is on the wrong runway. The instrument landing system isn't locking onto a beacon that should be dead ahead.
This should tell you something's not right.
If the plane had been on the correct runway, the display would have been centered. Before departing, pilots programmed the plane's computer to lock onto a beacon at the end of their designated runway. Flight 6's navigation system would have been scanning for that signal just before takeoff. The beacon was clearly off to their left, not ahead of them. Captain Fung was taxiing at a speed of 9 knots, about 9 miles an hour. Because the turn took so long, Captain Fung might have thought he'd gone further than he really did. So much time had passed that he may have thought he had already reached runway 5 left. Just before takeoff, the crew had one last chance to avoid disaster.
Now the PVD hasn't lined up.
It should have been a warning to the crew that something was wrong.
Never mind. We can see the runway just fine.
Captain Fung ignores the warning.
Okay, my control.
V1.
V1.
What happened next was inevitable.
There's something there.
There's the point of impact. The clues were there. They ignored them.
It's finally clear why Singapore Airlines Flight 6 ended up on the wrong runway. But with hundreds of planes taking off during the annual typhoon season, The challenge now is to make sure it never happens again. At Jakarta Air Traffic Control, Silk Air 185 has vanished from radar. The controller has heard no Mayday call. He tries to get a message to the missing flight with the help of another pilot.
Indonesia 238 Jakarta.
Go ahead, Indonesia 238.
Please relay to Silk Air 185 to contact Singapore 134.4.
Roger, Indonesia 238.
But the 737 is already submerged beneath the murky waters of Indonesia's Musi River, halfway between Jakarta and Singapore. Local villagers report the crash.
They're telling stories about the aircraft coming very fast from an altitude.
Along the river, people search for survivors, but find only small bits of debris. A 50-ton aircraft carrying 104 people has all but disappeared. News of the Silk Air crash has met with shock in Singapore, home to almost half the passengers. There is very little hope that anyone has survived. "24 hours later, following the crash of Silk Air 185, Indonesian investigator Sentosa Sayogo takes charge of the team from the National Transportation Safety Committee.
Empty those bags. Put it with the other bags for processing.
What we did is to go to the crash site, observe, and then record and preserve anything that we can use for the later investigation.
Or small debris.
The scale of the disaster soon becomes evident. There are no survivors. All 104 passengers and crew have been killed, including veteran pilot Captain Xu Wei Ming and his first officer Duncan Ward.
It was just complete bewilderment as to how it might have happened. In that situation, you go into a complete state of shock. I didn't really know what to believe.
In 1991, nearly 7 years before the Silk Air crash, a United Airlines 737 on approach to Colorado Springs took a sudden roll to the right. It hit the ground seconds later, killing everyone on board. Three years later, it happened again. 132 people died when a U.S. Air 737 crashed near Pittsburgh. Both accidents were caused by the same type of rudder malfunction.
That was a big concern because all of a sudden now you have the airplane doing things that the crew isn't anticipating.
Okay, wrap it up.
Investigators fear that the deadly rudder phenomenon may have struck again.
If the rudder had failed and it had gone hard over, as we had seen in these other events, that would have exposed it to higher aerodynamic loads and would have separated from the aircraft.
Even more disturbing, the rudder problem was supposed to have been solved. Boeing engineers came up with a fix before construction even began on the 737 that crashed in Indonesia.
For the accident aircraft, Boeing already modified the rudder.
So the question is, why would this airplane have had an experience like that, given the fact that it had the modifications to the rudder?
It is now crucial that the team figure out exactly when Flight 185's tail section broke off. Did it detach at 35,000 feet, throwing the plane into a dive? Or did something else cause the rapid descent? causing the tail to break off on the way down.
We had to examine the wreckage, see how these stabilizers came off, and then put that storyline together.
On day 5 of the investigation, there's a major breakthrough. Divers have found a key piece of the investigative puzzle in the mud at the bottom of the Musi River.
The accident happened on the 19th December, and we discovered flight data recorder in the afternoon of the 24th, one day before Christmas.
I can confirm. It is the FDR. Slightly damaged, but it doesn't look too bad.
It was kept in clean water just to preserve the information on it so it would not deteriorate.
If the FDR recording has survived, investigators should soon know exactly when Flight 185's tail section began to break off.
It's up to the guys in Washington now.
A team from Peru's Aviation Accident Investigation Commission must answer that question. Patrick Frickberg is in charge.
The first impression that I got, it was the terrible smell of fuel and blood. It was still burning 24 hours after it crashed. It amazed us that somebody had survived.
Gracias a ese cambio de asiento que tuve,
Thanks to my seat change, because I couldn't fit into the seat because of my size, they changed me to row 10, the emergency exit row. And that's why I had a chance to survive.
Frickberg is also amazed by the looting.
But they were taking anything they could carry from the wreckage site. They took tires, oxygen bottles, doors, metal pieces, parts of the landing gear. And maybe there was an interest of exchanging them for money.
The small troop of government soldiers at the crash site.
Excuse me, I'm with CIAA. I'm gonna need your help, please.
Can't protect all the evidence.
It was huge as well, so it wasn't that easy of a situation to control.
Hey, I need both these engines guarded around the clock. No exceptions.
Frickberg is forced to preserve the most important pieces.
We could distinguish the engines, but everything else was into small pieces.
We need to take pictures of everything before it's all gone. Let's go.
What he can't guard, he tries to document.
I mean, the pieces were there, the flight controls were there. We found the cockpit, parts of the cockpit. We found the seats. We were mainly worried about recovering the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder.
Hope of getting some answers is renewed when within hours they find one of the plane's 2 black boxes. Since Peru lacks the technology to read the data, the cockpit voice recorder will be shipped to the NTSB in Washington for analysis.
It's like a rush because, okay, we have something to work with now.
But the second black box, the flight data recorder, is still nowhere to be found.
Any sign of the FDR? Well, I can guess what happened to it. Keep looking.
It's more than likely that looters have taken the FDR.
Watching that some of the evidence was being taken away, we were very, very frustrated that we could not have a better control of the crash site.
With the evidence they need disappearing by the minute, they post a $500 reward for the return of the flight data recorder.
It tells us how the engines were, or the systems were performing until they crashed, until the aircraft crashes. So it's pretty necessary information to have.
It seems that $500 was too good to pass up for one man in Pucallpa. In a major breakthrough for investigators, the man agrees to exchange the second black box for the reward money.
He was pretty much the good guy at the time.
Frickberg needs to know how they could have made such a fundamental error. He reviews the events leading up to the crash, a perfect storm of unlikely events and tragic mistakes. It starts
You can sit in the cabin if you prefer.
with a broken seatbelt on the first officer's jump seat. The captain is left flying with only a young, inexperienced trainee.
Textbook major.
Thank you, sir.
You remind me of myself.
Look at that beast.
Captain Perez Palma misjudges the storm
We can get in through here.
and flies right through it. Intense hail shatters the windshield.
Do you have the runway in sight?
Blinding the crew.
No, I don't have it.
When a massive downdraft hits, the pilots don't notice their plane is descending until the ground proximity alarm goes off. Then they make the biggest mistake of all. They fail to throttle up.
Move with me.
Investigators conclude that happened as the result of one critical decision taken moments earlier by Captain Perez Palma.
It sealed their fate.
Investigators analyze a pivotal decision made by the captain of Flight 204 less than a minute before the crash.
At the last moment, he took control.
When he began to lose confidence in his co-pilot,
Or maybe I have it, okay?
he took command and became the pilot flying the plane. At that moment, Chirinos Delgado became first officer.
Gear down? Not yet.
The pilots have switched roles.
Look at the speed, you idiot!
Both seem confused by the transition.
Hurry with the flaps!
It's now the co-pilot's job to monitor the changes in altitude.
Flaps 5. Okay, flaps 5.
But he's distracted by the demands of the captain.
Never both pilots are looking outside at the same time. Never. Always one of the pilots must keep close contact with the instruments.
I can't see it! I can't see anything! Pull it! Okay? Move with me!
Though both pilots were pulling back, they both likely assumed the other one would take the crucial second step needed to get out of trouble, pushing the throttles forward to maximum thrust.
When pilots are too confident and self-sufficient, they get used to the idea that nothing will happen.
We'll make it.
Call it lack of discipline or not obeying the rules, but that's what happened.
At Los Angeles International Airport, United Airlines Flight 718 is preparing to depart for Chicago. At 9:04 in the morning, Flight 718 lifts off from Los Angeles. Captain Shirley must follow an assigned corridor through the airspace around Los Angeles. After that, he's free to fly wherever he wants, as long as he reports in, passing a series of waypoints along the route to Chicago. 54 minutes into the flight, the DC-7 reaches its second waypoint. The crew will next check in when they cross a point on the map known as the Painted Desert Line. Cruising at 21,000 feet, the crew spots thunderclouds ahead and adjusts their course.
How we doing on your side, Bob? Thunderhead 5 miles south. We're clear of it. Damn!
Shocked passengers have no idea what's gone wrong.
Oh, God! Bank, 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 bank! Come on, baby, come on!
Flight 718 is overdue to check in. Calls from dispatch go unanswered. Air Traffic Control Headquarters in Salt Lake City.
CA Salt Lake.
Controllers here don't normally communicate directly with flight crews. They get flight information by phone from airline dispatchers who are in radio contact with their pilots. At 10:51, they get a disturbing call from United Airlines dispatch.
Salt Lake. Understand, United 718, 20 minutes overdue at Painted Desert.
Moments later, another dispatcher calls. More disturbing news.
Salt Lake, TWA. I'm getting no response from Flight 2.
Understand, TWA. Flight 2, 20 minutes overdue at Painted Desert. We have had no contact here.
Controllers now know that 2 planes flying from LA have not reported crossing a scheduled waypoint, the Painted Desert line. United Flight 718 and TWA Flight 2 to Kansas City were both expected to reach that waypoint at 10:31. Controllers send out a bulletin asking local authorities to keep an eye out for the 2 missing planes. The next morning, news comes from authorities in Arizona, confirming everyone's worst fears.
They found him?
The remains of 2 different planes have been spotted in Arizona's Grand Canyon. The twisted wreckage of United 718 lies on a rocky ledge 688 feet up the sheer canyon wall. The Air Tour pilot spots the second crash site on the floor of the canyon, about 1 mile away. The immediate priority is to get rescuers into one of the least accessible places in North America. When rescuers finally reach the crash area, they first find the scattered remains of TWA Flight 2. Reaching the wreckage of the other plane will be even more difficult. It's not long before rescuers come to a grim conclusion. Everyone aboard both planes is dead. It is now up to investigators from the Civil Aeronautics Board to piece together what happened. With no cockpit voice recorder to help them, investigators turn to radio dispatch recordings and transcripts. TWA Flight 2 took off 3 minutes ahead of the United flight in a different direction. It was to fly northeast towards its first checkpoint, Daggett. The TWA pilot was Jack Gandy. With 15,000 hours as captain, he was nearly as experienced as United's Bob Shirley. Gandy knew these skies well. He'd flown this route nearly 200 times.
Good morning, TWA Dispatch, TWA 2. We've got a little bit of weather here we want to get on top of. Be a good man and ask Salt Lake to clear us to 21,000.
Roger, TWA 2, requesting clearance at 21,000 feet.
So, TWA asked for 21,000. So Salt Lake clears them?
No. Request denied due to conflicting traffic.
Advisory, TWA 2, unable to approve to 1,000 due to traffic.
That's a no-go on 21,000. United 718 is there.
Captain Gandy wants to avoid the clouds in his path. And in 1956, he has another way to accomplish that.
Let's just get on top of this stuff.
He uses visual flight rules, or VFR.
Roger that. Advise Salt Lake I'm going to VFR and 1,000 on top.
Salt Lake, TWA 2 requesting 1,000 on top.
Maintain at least 1,000 on top. Advise TWA 2 his traffic is United 718, direct Durango.
The TWA crew was cleared to fly 1,000 feet above the clouds, but warned to look out for United 718. Half an hour after requesting 1,000 on top, Gandy reports his actual altitude.
21,000 feet.
Investigators now understand how the TWA flight ended up at the same altitude as United 718. As for why both planes diverted from their scheduled routes at the same time.
Damn! What's he doing there? Pull up! Pull up!
The answer is the crash site itself. An awe-inspiring natural wonder.
Let's give him a look, shall we?
Aye, Captain.
Wonderful sights to see way down below. The Grand Canyon, for instance, one of the 7 wonders of the world.
Just keep your eyes peeled and you'll get a spectacular view no matter where you're sitting. Damn!
But on June 30th, 1956, it proves fatal.
Oh, God!
Jack Parshall needs to find out how such a common practice killed 128 people. The seasoned crew of American Airlines Flight 191
Rudder set.
makes final preparations for takeoff.
Spoilers armed.
From Chicago's O'Hare Airport. The DC-10's 3-engine layout makes it one of the most recognizable passenger jets on the runway. On this flight, a live feed from a video camera mounted in the cockpit allows passengers to watch the takeoff from the cabin.
American 191, you are cleared for takeoff.
American 191. Underway. You have control. I have control. Runway clear? Clear. Okay, setting takeoff thrust. Here we go. Damn. There's the turbulence. Not too rough. I've lost power to my side.
The captain's instruments suddenly go dead.
Looks like we've lost number one.
And he's lost power from the left engine. But the plane is already airborne.
Look at this. Look at this. Equipment. I need equipment. He blew an engine.
The DC-10 should be able to climb with only 2 engines. Pilots are trained to cope with this kind of emergency. First, they need to get as far from the ground as they can. They put their plane into a steeper climb. Forward speed drops.
We're banking. Go right, go right.
The plane is banking sharply to the left. It's only 325 feet from the ground.
I can't hold it.
American 191 Heavy, do you copy?
He's not talking to me.
Losing power from one engine should not be causing the plane to bank. Passengers have a frightening view of the ground below.
What's going on?
The pilots can't get the altitude they need, and they're banking further and further to the left.
I'm losing it. Go right, go right. Come on, come on. 300 feet, we're losing altitude.
The cockpit camera gives passengers a glimpse of their fate. But they are not the only ones whose lives are in danger. A trailer park just north of the airport is home to thousands of people.
Oh, God.
And the plane is heading straight for it. Witnesses on the ground can clearly see Flight 191 flying on its side.
We're still turning. Level, baby, level. Brace, brace, brace.
The DC-10 crashes into an airport hangar at the edge of the airport. The full load of fuel instantly ignites.
DC-10 with 271 souls on board has gone down. Northwest of runway 32 right.
American Airlines Flight 191 has crashed just short of the trailer park beside Chicago's O'Hare Airport. The DC-10 has also obliterated a hangar beyond the runway. Once the fire is under control, the search for survivors can begin. All 271 people on board are dead. It's the worst aviation disaster in U.S. history. Investigator Michael Marks believes the shattered pieces from the engine pylon may explain why Flight 191 fell from the sky.
Hey, look for yourself. See, that had to happen before the crash.
A close examination reveals a crack in the metal that clearly developed slowly over time. It's a telltale sign that the pylon bulkhead was already damaged before the crash.
You can see where it's spread. All along there.
The crack that Michael Marks finds runs along the top edge of the aft bulkhead. The microscopic examination gives Marks another clue. A dent on the pylon bulkhead at exactly the point where the crack began. Investigators arrange to watch as another DC-10 undergoes the same maintenance that was performed on Flight 191 just weeks before the crash. To save time, the airline has modified a key maintenance procedure.
Okay, bring her up.
The normal procedure for servicing an engine involves removing it from the pylon and leaving the pylon attached to the wing. There are hundreds of connections to be undone. The quicker way involves taking out just 3 bolts. The engine is removed from the wing while still attached to the pylon. It saves about 200 man-hours of labor.
Now up!
Maneuvering the pylon into position with an engine attached to it is a tricky procedure.
I think I know what happened.
A possible explanation surfaces.
Take her down.
For the mysterious dent found on the pylon from Flight 191. The team in Tulsa calls Marks.
What do you got?
They describe how the maintenance crew struggled to fit the pylon attachment into the mounting bracket, or clevis. Marks concludes that on the accident plane, the clevis must have slammed into the top of the pylon bulkhead as the engine was being reattached. The impact could have started the crack that led to the pylon's failure and to the crash itself. Over the next 8 weeks, each time the plane took off, the stress that the massive engine put on the pylon made the crack grow larger. It was only a matter of time before the pylon snapped and the engine fell off.
How long have you been putting the engines on this way?
Not sure, but every airline does it.
Even more worrying, the mechanics at American Airlines are not the only ones cutting corners. It is now clear why the engine fell from the plane. December 28, 1978.
Losing an engine.
United Airlines Flight 173 is less than 22 miles from Portland International Airport. The plane's engines are flaming out one after another. With 2 engines gone, the autopilot can no longer fly the plane. McBroom must get the crippled DC-8 to the airport himself. The engineer struggles to keep the last 2 engines running.
We just lost 1 and 2.
Flight 173 has now lost all 4 engines. With no engines running, backup batteries now provide power to only critical instruments. The 100-ton aircraft is losing more than 3,000 feet of altitude a minute. At this rate, they will be lucky to stay airborne for as long as 90 seconds. Now, Captain McBroom makes a horrifying calculation.
I can't make it.
The airport is too far away.
Okay, declare Mayday. Portland Tower, United 173, heavy Mayday.
He declared Mayday, and then in a very, what seemed to me like a calm, matter-of-fact voice, I could hear the pilot.
The engines are flaming out. We're going down. We're not going to be able to make it to the airport.
We lost power. We're going down.
Emergency services are told what's happening.
Flight 173 is flamed out. They're going down.
The DC-8 is coming down over a densely populated suburb. Suddenly, Captain McBroom sees what he's been looking for. A dark area up ahead. It looks like an empty field.
The place that you want to put it is where there's minimum buildings, the most open area possible, because the 200,000 pounds plus jet arriving at 140 knots, which is 160 plus miles an hour, it's going to do a lot of damage to the things on the ground.
Putting the plane on this narrow strip of land is McBroom's best bet. But as he gets closer, he realizes it isn't an open field.
We can't make it.
It's a heavily wooded suburb, and he's headed straight for it.
If they're woods and that's all you have, then you're going to have to deal with it. The tops of trees are pretty soft. As you settle into the trees, they get progressively less soft. They're going to do a lot of damage.
McBroom doesn't give up. He actually tries to steer the plane between the trees. The passengers still assume they're about to touch down on a runway.
We clipped the top of a few trees, and that felt like we were making the initial landing at the airport. So my first sense was, hooray, we're there. And then all hell broke loose.
I saw the bright flash out there and knew he had gone down.
The plane carves a 1,600-foot-long path through the trees. Incredibly, the DC-8 has crash-landed in the middle of a major American city without injuring a single person on the ground. Most of the 189 passengers and crew are alive, including Captain Malcolm McBroom.
We're losing an engine.
NTSB investigator Alan Deal has discovered something crucial on the CVR.
It's flamed out. What?
Less than 8 minutes before the DC-8 crashes into a Portland suburb, the captain seems unconvinced that low fuel is behind his engine failure.
He was asking what was causing that, and he got a very adamant answer saying fuel. Fuel. As if to say, we've been trying to tell you about this all along.
Hoping those crossfeeds there or something.
There are crossfeed valves that are opened in a specific sequence to let one tank feed one or more engines. And it's the job of the flight engineer, in the case of a DC-8, to know exactly how to do that.
Showing fumes.
Though the crew couldn't agree on exactly how much was left,
Showing 1,000 or better. I don't think it's in there.
one thing is certain: there isn't enough to keep the engines running.
Losing an engine. It's flamed out.
It takes a few things to make an engine run. One of them is fuel.
You got that crossfeed open?
Captain McBroom is desperate. He needs to get more fuel to the remaining engines.
No, I haven't got it open. Which one?
Open them both. Damn it, get some fuel in there.
Each of the plane's 4 engines has its own fuel tank. Opening the crossfeed should allow fuel to flow between the 4 main tanks.
Number 2 is empty.
But it's not working.
You're gonna lose number 3 in a minute, too.
One by one, fuel starvation shuts down all the engines, leaving the DC-8 without any power.
Okay, declare a mayday.
The engines didn't have any fuel.
We knew that the aircraft ran out of fuel. So then became the question, why? Why would a modern transport aircraft like this run out of fuel?
Investigators focus on 2 possibilities: mechanical failure or human error.
Was it a crew problem or was it an aircraft problem?
Investigators desperately need to know what happened during the final moments of Flight 9633. They catch a break when they learn that an airport security camera off the end of the runway recorded the Yak-42 as it finally lifted off. The grainy image could provide a crucial lead.
Whoa. Can you play that again?
The video shows that the plane was properly configured for takeoff, but beyond that, it holds no new information. No clue as to what went wrong.
Okay, they started here. They lifted off here.
The airport runway wasn't the issue. They had plenty of room to take off.
They had about 2,800 plus meters of runway available.
That's more than twice the distance they should need.
Something kept the plane on the ground. The question is, what? They suspect the plane might simply have been too heavy.
Aside from being harder to get in the air if you weigh more, anything that weighs more is going to be harder to accelerate.
It's a lesson that was learned nearly 9 years earlier in Charlotte, North Carolina. All 21 people aboard a commuter plane died when it crashed and burst into flames less than a minute after takeoff. The plane was 579 pounds above the allowed maximum. Weight was also considered a key factor in the U.S. Army's deadliest peacetime crash. On Aero Air Flight 1285, the weight of 248 soldiers equipped with heavy gear was underestimated. Their DC-8 fell from the sky 2,900 feet beyond the end of the runway in Gander, Newfoundland. Everyone on board was killed.
If the weight is underestimated or not calculated at all, you just don't have that clear picture of what exactly to expect from the airplane.
They didn't know their weight.
Concerns mount when investigators learn that Yak Service didn't have baggage scales at Yaroslavl's airport.
There was no way to weigh the gear, the luggage and the cargo that would be loaded in the airplane, so it was estimated.
Investigators estimate the weight of the team and their hockey gear. Ultimately, they find the plane was not overloaded.
The weight is under the limit.
It may not be the answer, but it provides an important clue.
It does not appear that was a contributing issue on this in this case, but it shows that the crew was not properly preparing the information they would need during the takeoff roll.
Results from the brake system analysis are in. There's no evidence of mechanical failure. The finding moves the investigation closer to a disturbing conclusion. One of the pilots must have applied the brakes himself. A review of the crew's flight records offers up a clue. Both pilots routinely trained on and flew two different versions of the Yak plane. The Yak-40 is a much older regional jet that carries up to 32 passengers. The larger Yak-42, which the hockey team was on, debuted in 1980. Both pilots were more experienced on the older Yak-40, but they also regularly flew the newer Yak-42.
It is improper and incorrect to train a pilot to fly two airplanes at the same time.
It's beginning to look like the crew's habit of flying two different but similar planes may have led to confusion in the cockpit. Focusing in on the brake pedals, investigators spot a small but potentially significant difference. On the older Yak-40, a pilot rests his foot on the brake. On the newer Yak-42, he must put his heel on the floor.
They were flying back and forth, these two different kinds of aircraft, which happened to have different ways of putting their feet on the brake pedal. And that was when the aha started to appear.
A pilot accustomed to flying the older Yak might have placed his whole foot on the pedal, and as a result, could have activated the brakes. It's a promising theory, but questions remain. Investigators can't understand why a pilot wouldn't notice his mistake right away.
You'd have to put about 10, 15, 20 pounds of pressure onto the pedals. And that is a significant weight. You would think a person would feel that.
They find a clue in the crew's medical records. First Officer Igor Zhivyelov had secretly been treated for a nerve condition. He should not have been certified to fly.
He was losing the sensations in his legs. It was a medical development. It didn't make him fall down, but it made him less aware of feedback from feelings in his feet.
So the argument was made that the first officer could have been pressing on the brake pedals without even realizing it.
Then investigators make another startling discovery.
Football.
The brakes didn't just slow the plane down, they also prevented liftoff.
It's going to pitch you down because you are being pushed by engines that are above the brakes. It's going to give the aircraft a nose-down pitch.
By engaging the brakes on the rotating wheels, the crew was actually forcing the nose down. The effect was like glue, sticking the plane to the runway.
You probably set stabilizer too low.
The combined errors meant the plane was doomed.
Full power!
As soon as it was airborne.
At that point, the braking force of contact of the tires with the runway now stops. And all the other forces that you've been putting into the aircraft, pulling back on the yoke, elevator trim, flaps, just to get the nose up. They are now no longer counteracted by the nose down force of the braking. The aircraft immediately goes into a nose up, a high pitch rate, 20 degrees up in about 2 seconds, and you can't stay in the air.
The sudden nose-up attitude causes the wings to quickly lose lift. Drag increases, the speed drops, the plane goes into a stall.
And you're just a big hunk of metal and fuel and flesh just falling through the air.
Polish Air Force Flight 101 is carrying 89 passengers, including President Lech Kaczynski. 4 of Poland's best pilots are in the cockpit. They're elite military airmen from the country's Special Aviation Regiment. Just after 10 o'clock, the plane begins its descent to Smolensk. The state flight from Warsaw took off at 9:27 this morning. Few understand Poland's troubled past better than President Kaczynski. By visiting a memorial near the site of the massacre, the Polish president is taking an important step towards reconciliation. The elite crew is flying a Tupolev Tu-154M, an extremely popular Russian-built plane. As they get closer to the airport, the workload picks up. Flight engineer Andrzej Mikalik must calculate engine performance.
May I please have the temperature and pressure?
I'll tell you what the temperature is. Cold.
He needs some vital information from the tower.
Are we going to speak Russian?
Yes.
English is the international language of civil aviation. But since Smolensk is a military airport, controllers here speak only Russian. Passenger jets don't normally land at this base. But for the Polish delegation, it's the closest runway to the Katyn Memorial. Captain Arkadiusz Protaziuk is the only member of this Polish crew who speaks Russian. He'll have to handle the communication with the tower.
Polski 101, Polish 101. Good morning.
Polish 101, acknowledge. Polish Air Force, we have fog. Visibility is 400 meters.
Understood. Polish Air Force 101. Heavy fog, visibility is only 400 meters.
Smolensk Air Base doesn't have the equipment needed for a radio-guided landing. The pilots will first have to descend to just above 300 feet, then look for the runway. Once they spot it, they'll have to land manually.
Temperature and pressure, please.
Temperature is +2, pressure 745. We do not have landing conditions.
Continuing our approach, if we're unable to land, we'll go around on autopilot.
Captain Protaziuk takes his plane lower to get a first-hand look at landing conditions. But as they get closer, the fog gets even thicker.
Approaching outer marker. On course.
Then, the situation takes a turn for the worse. As the crew strains to catch sight of the runway, the sound of an alarm suddenly fills the cockpit.
100 meters.
Terrain.
We are leaving for a go-around. 90 meters.
But the crew is struggling to make the plane climb.
20!
No one has survived. It's a monumental tragedy. One of the darkest days in Polish history. A day that was to have been commemorated by the president himself will now be remembered for yet another tragedy.
Director, the fog has rolled in.
Investigators refocus their attention on the cockpit voice recorder.
Turn on your landing lights.
Lights on.
They hear a warning that the plane is dangerously low. But strangely, the pilots don't seem to react to it.
You can't see a thing.
Turn on your landing lights.
Investigators are puzzled by the crew's behavior. They compare the plane's intended flight path to the altitudes called out by the navigator.
100 meters. 90 meters.
40. 30. 20.
Stop.
40.
Just after the navigator calls out 65 feet,
20.
the unmistakable sound of the plane hitting the first tree.
20 meters?
They hit the tree at 11 meters, not 20.
Something's not right. The navigator is calling out 65 feet, but the plane is only 36 feet from the ground.
They didn't know the altitude.
The recording leaves investigators with two important questions. Why did the crew ignore the alarms? And why were they closer to the ground than they thought? The team pores over the flight data, checking for signs of an altimeter malfunction.
Lieutenant,
It could explain the crash.
what happens here?
But instead of a malfunction, they find that the altimeter reading makes a sudden jump. A barometric altimeter shows the plane's height above sea level by measuring atmospheric pressure. Air pressure goes up as the plane goes down. The numbers show that the instrument was reset to its default setting, a move that resulted in an altimeter reading much higher than the plane's actual height above the ground.
Why would a pilot do that?
Polish investigators take their questions to pilots from the same special regiment that flew the president.
What do you think they were doing?
They learn that military pilots sometimes use the barometric altimeter to solve an annoying problem. The altimeter is connected to the Terrain Altitude Warning System, or TAWS. It alerts pilots if they're getting too close to the ground. The alarm goes off so frequently at military airports that some pilots have developed a dangerous habit of disregarding the sound. They've also come up with ways to silence the nuisance alarms. One way is to simply reset the altimeter. That fools the system into thinking the plane is flying at a higher altitude.
Start playback.
It seems incredible that such an elite crew flying such high-ranking passengers would commit a breach of procedures.
100 meters.
Even if they did, it doesn't explain why the navigator was calling out the wrong altitude during the descent.
90 meters.
Stop playback. He was using his radio altimeter.
Most large jets are equipped with two types of altimeter.
40.
Since the barometric altimeter has been reset,
30.
the navigator could only have been using the second one. When the radio altimeter read 300 feet, the Air Force jet was not 300 feet above the airport. It was 300 feet from the bottom of the valley. Once they cleared the valley, they were just above the treetops. The radio altimeter was giving them misleading information. It doomed everyone on board. January 25th, 2010. It's just past midnight at Beirut's International Airport. Captain Habtamu Nagasa has been flying with Ethiopian Airlines for over 20 years and has more than 10,000 hours in the cockpit.
Exterior checks complete? Check complete, no problems.
The first officer is far less experienced. Alula Bayene is a recent graduate of the Ethiopian Airlines Flight Academy. Tonight, there are 82 passengers aboard the Boeing 737. They are preparing for an overnight flight to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Flight 409's flight plan calls for it to head southwest, then make a U-turn towards a navigational checkpoint called Cheka. Ethiopian Airlines 409 lifts off just after 2:30 in the morning. The captain begins banking the plane to the right as he climbs.
Ethiopian 409, control 19.3, Ma Salama.
The tower controller bids the crew goodbye and hands the flight off to a colleague.
Ethiopian 409, good morning. Climb flight level 290.
The area controller instructs Flight 409 to climb to 29,000 feet.
Flight level 290, Ethiopian 409.
But the weather ahead is becoming fierce. Just a few minutes into the flight, something is going wrong. An alarm warns the crew that their turn is becoming dangerously steep. Captain Nagasa is struggling to correct the problem. He veers back to the left towards the thunderstorm the controller wants him to avoid. The controller sees that Flight 409 is starting to veer back towards Beirut. He warns the pilots again that they need to turn.
Ethiopian 409. Follow heading 270. Turn right, heading 270.
Right, heading 270, roger.
Okay, what heading did he say?
270, set.
The cockpit fills with a disturbing sound.
What is it?
The control columns vibrate, warning them that the plane is about to stall.
Speed! What is it? Go around, go around.
Roger, go around.
The captain pushes the throttle all the way up to go around power. But their situation is even more dire.
God! Oh God! Oh God!
As day breaks, wreckage begins to wash up on shore. Navy ships recover floating debris and some human remains. 82 passengers and 8 crew are dead. Investigators return to the CDR. They hope the crew's conversation can shed light on why 2 qualified pilots lost control of a mechanically sound airplane.
Exterior checks complete?
Check complete, no problems.
They notice something odd. The first officer is uncharacteristically quiet.
Okay. Engage the autopilot.
Even worse, he's not following his captain's commands.
Hold on. Stop for a second.
The crew's behavior is baffling. It forces investigators to consider an unlikely explanation for what went wrong. Something called subtle incapacitation. It's a controversial idea that goes beyond the usual definition of pilot error.
What is it? This room doesn't make you sleepy?
Investigators continue to analyze the cockpit recording.
What are these guys doing?
They listen to what the pilots were saying just before takeoff.
What are they doing up there?
Was there weed in it?
Did you feel dizzy?
Oh, I couldn't sleep.
Well, me too.
Investigators are shocked to hear the pilots joking about being tired and the reference to weed.
That would have changed things.
Subtle incapacitation may not be such an unlikely cause after all. Subtle incapacitation is difficult to prove. In the crash of Flight 409, the evidence so far is mixed. But what investigators discover next could tip the balance.
Gear up.
Employment records detailing the pilot's flight hours.
Heading select.
Heading select, check.
Reveal critical information about the captain of Flight 409. He'd been working almost non-stop for nearly 2 months.
The 51 days, he probably flew something like 45 days out of the 51.
The crew's last chance to rest was a scheduled stopover after flying into Beirut.
I could use some food that didn't come from an airplane. What do you say?
Yeah. Good meal will be good.
All right, let's do it. Didn't have a lot of water today.
Oh, she'll bring back for some. She'll bring some. Oh, here we go.
Did you feel dizzy?
Oh, I couldn't sleep.
Investigators suspect that the heavy meal kept them awake at night. The storm conditions likely added to the pilot's stress. Fatigued and under increasing stress, they lost track of where they were and what they were doing.
Go around. Go around. Go around. Roger. Go around.
Investigators conclude the accident was caused by a crew that was simply too tired or too confused to recover from the first wrong turn. It's a textbook example of subtle incapacitation. Merida Airport, Venezuela. On February 21, 2008, the crew of Santa Barbara Airlines Flight 518 arrives for the last flight of the day. Captain Aldino Garanito Gomez is a senior pilot and flight instructor for the airline with over 5,000 hours in the air. The captain's first officer today is one of his closest friends. Dennis Ferreira Quintal has over 2,000 flying hours. This afternoon, First Officer Ferreira Quintal is handling the flying.
"70 knots.
The captain monitors the instruments.
V1. And rotate. Gear up. Check. We're up.
Flight 518 is bound for Venezuela's capital, Caracas. The airline operates this 90-minute flight 3 times daily. Navigating the mountainous terrain around Merida demands a lot from pilots. The official flight plan takes planes southwest through a river valley, so they can gain height before looping back to the north and over the mountains towards Caracas. Flight 518 turns left as it climbs out of the valley. Then, 6 minutes into the flight, something begins to go wrong. An alarm is sounding a warning that the plane is dangerously close to the ground.
Santa Barbara 518, do you copy? Santa Barbara 518, please respond.
15 minutes later, Flight 518 hasn't checked in as scheduled.
Flight 518 is missing 43 passengers on board.
As daylight fades at Merida Airport, a search and rescue team gets ready to launch. When a flight goes missing, rescuers often use a plane's radar track to pinpoint its last position. But Merida Airport has no radar. The rescuers don't know where to find Flight 518.
Okay, we don't have a last known position, so the search radius here is going to be large, okay?
With no other clues to follow, they start their search by air. Then comes distressing news from high in the Andes. Mountain villagers have reported a plane crash 6 miles from Merida. There's no word about any survivors. Rescuers, carried by helicopter, arrive at Los Conejos, a remote Andes mountaintop. The air is thin, the temperature near freezing.
Let's leave our...
Hope of finding survivors in the wreckage fades quickly. The crash has killed all 46 people on board. Rescuers have recovered Flight 518's 2 flight recorders.
Good.
The flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder capture important details of what the pilots did and said. The search for answers takes them to Paris, to the French Accident Investigation Authority, the BEA. Technicians download data from the flight data recorder, or FDR. It reveals that the doomed plane hit the mountain just 6 minutes and 47 seconds after takeoff. If a mechanical failure was to blame, the FDR should have a record of it.
What is this?
But investigators face a huge problem. Certain information simply isn't there. Strangely, the FDR lacks any navigational data. It's a major setback, one that puts even more pressure on investigators to find the answers for the mourning families. They need to piece together some of the missing flight data and come up with an unorthodox way of doing it.
Tell me when you're ready. Okay?
They try to figure out the movements of the plane.
Same crap as the other day. If you want, you can start to turn, Dennis.
Turning now.
Investigators are able to study every movement of the control column, the one thing that was properly recorded.
Pitch up 10 degrees.
Step by step, they piece together the flight.
Left 15 degrees now.
The recreation shows that the plane was flying normally as it flew away from the airport. But then it began to veer off course.
You see? Right here. This is when it went off course.
The finding confirms that there was a problem with navigation. But investigators can't be sure if that was due to pilot error or mechanical failure. With no hard answers from the flight data recorder, investigators in Venezuela consider some conversations captured on the cockpit voice recorder. They focus in on the last moments of the short flight, hoping to hear something that might explain why the plane veered off course.
Yeah, get to 067.
The pilots discuss their compass heading.
Dennis! We're at 074, aren't we?
What investigators hear next provides a disturbing glimpse into the flight's final seconds.
Damn, Aldino, we're at 318.
The pilots couldn't agree on where they were headed.
They have no idea where they are.
It's a key finding in the investigation.
Aldino!
A clearer picture of the flight's final moments is slowly emerging.
Aldino! Hold on.
Investigators now know the pilots were in control of the aircraft.
Hold on. Easy, Dennis, easy.
But the question remains. Why were they so badly off course? May 31st, 2009. Air France Flight 447 is crossing the Atlantic. The Airbus A330 is flying overnight from Rio de Janeiro to Paris. 58-year-old Captain Marc Dubois is in command.
Here's the new forecast.
He's been a pilot for well over half his life and is now one of the most senior captains at Air France.
It's hard to see anything in this plane with this lighting.
First Officer Pierre-Cedric Bonin is 32 years old. He's been flying the A330 for about a year.
We are arriving at Intol.
37-year-old relief pilot David Robert is on standby. The three pilots fly in shifts to stay alert. There are 216 passengers on the 11-hour flight. Autopilot holds the plane steady at 35,000 feet. And the crew communicates with Brazilian air traffic control.
Air France 447, contact Atlantic Center.
As they fly, an onboard computer monitors the engines, hydraulics, and other systems. It also sends progress reports to Air France headquarters. Every 10 minutes, the computer transmits the plane's position along with any maintenance data.
Air France 447 calling Atlantico.
Air France 447, Atlantico, go ahead.
3 hours into the flight, the captain reports reaching a navigational waypoint off the coast of Brazil.
Air France 447 position in tow.
Maintain flight level 350.
Okay, will do.
At 1:49 a.m., the A330 leaves Brazilian radar surveillance and enters a communications dead zone over the mid-Atlantic. 2 hours later, an air traffic controller in Senegal tries to contact the flight.
Air France 447, this is Dakar. Do you copy? Come in, Air France 447.
He can't reach the crew, so he alerts Air France.
Dakar for Air France. Have you heard from Air 447? Over.
Negative. Hold for Air France, please.
No one has heard from the crew of Flight 447. The only communication, 24 maintenance messages transmitted by the plane hours earlier. An Air France maintenance worker tries to make contact, but his message bounces back. Perhaps the communication system has failed. By the time the plane should have reached French airspace, controllers still can't make contact. At Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, the 11:10 a.m. arrival time comes and goes with no sign of Flight 447. The A330 would have run out of fuel by now. The airline begins notifying families. The plane has almost certainly crashed at sea. By the afternoon of June 1st, the world learns that Flight 447 from Rio to Paris has mysteriously vanished. It's one of the worst accidents in the history of commercial aviation. An advanced passenger jet is gone. 228 people are presumed dead. In Paris, French police escort the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder to Leo Sartorius' lab. After nearly 2 years of searching and theorizing, the world may finally understand what happened on board Flight 447. The answer to what went wrong may be locked in these watertight containers.
There was a lot of concern that we might take a false step that would lead to the loss of the information.
One wrong move and a 2-year search costing over $42 million will have been for nothing. Starting with the cockpit voice recorder, they carefully opened the protective casing, looking for the memory card inside.
The worst thing would have been for the actual memory cards to be broken, physically broken.
This isn't good. See the damage?
We quickly noticed that there were small parts that were broken, so we weren't sure that everything was in working order.
If technicians can't fix the cockpit voice recorder, they may never know what happened in the cockpit or even who was flying the plane. A close examination of the second box, the flight data recorder, brings better news.
It's fine. No problems.
I think we all looked at each other and said, it's incredible that they're in this state. It's incredible. We were able to read the data very quickly.
While technicians try to repair the cockpit voice recorder, Sartorius carefully plots the data from the FDR. The FDR data reveals that the pitot tubes did, in fact, freeze.
The pitot tubes freeze here.
The frozen tubes produce erratic airspeed readings, causing the autopilot to shut off automatically.
The pilot takes control of the plane.
It warns the pilots very loudly. That can be a bit of a surprise, a bit of a shock. And it definitely was a shock to these pilots. And it was their reaction to this warning which was the key to everything else that followed.
All crews are taught that a frozen pitot tube should clear itself in less than a minute.
The pitots on the aircraft, they were only subject to the clogging for about 56 seconds, and after that, the airspeed readings were back to normal again.
The pilot only needs to hold the plane steady, and the problem will disappear.
But he does not hold steady.
Whoever was flying the plane pulled back and pitched the nose up instead.
When
the autopilot disconnected, the pilot in command changed the pitch of the plane.
He climbs more than 2,500 feet.
If you pull the nose of an airplane up, it's going uphill, it's going to slow down.
Their speed dropped more than 90 knots in less than a minute.
Raising the nose of the plane at high altitude put the plane into a stall very quickly.
dans une situation de décrochage.
In an aerodynamic stall, the wings lose lift and the plane drops from the sky.
C'est les actions des pilotes.
It was the pilot's actions that led to the stall.
They fell at more than 12,000 feet per minute.
Inexplicably, the pilot continued to pull back when he should have been pitching the plane's nose down to gain speed and lift.
The more you raise the nose, the more the lift will be destroyed. And that's what was happening to Air France 447.